Oops. All right. This is going to take a little bit to get started, but I think we should be good. Okay. So the excuse me. The stream seems to be up and running, and you may notice that there isn't the traditional sort of spacey background. It's kind of funny because, like, when I first started streaming, I had quite a few space games, so it sort of seemed appropriate to use. I think that's an image from the Hubble Space Telescope. It's been a while since I've looked at that source image. Um, but it's pretty clear a lot of my play lately has been historical strategy, and certainly that's a really big part of my my gaming background and history and interest. Which of course makes it very appropriate that we're going to be playing Imperium's Greek Wars today. Now, there's some background for this. I actually feel like I owe the developer Cube Games a massive apology. But the other thing is that I wanted to like there's a small technical problem I have in trying to broadcast this game. Now, admittedly, that might be because I've been trying to sort of rush to like get started. I'm quite late in starting tonight. Um, Forgive me, it's Canada Day. I was debating on not streaming at all, but I did say that I was going to stream on Friday, and I don't like backing out on broadcasts. But but yeah, it's I may be able to resolve this with a little bit of extra time. But I figured my best bet is to just stream the game on full screen. Do the best I can with that. Hopefully there isn't anything too embarrassing in my browser tabs because I didn't really check before I came up. But I'm going to assume that there's probably a lot of Wikipedia and probably more math than I would normally want people to see. Wikipedia is fine. I mean, where else are you going to learn? And I'm probably not going to pay for Encyclopedia Britannica when there is a free resource available. But yeah, it's just easier for me to keep this all open at the start. We are going to jump into the game, but there were some preliminary remarks that I wanted to make, and I figured I'd get all of that sort of out of the way first, and then I would be able to sort of move on to the later steps of playing the game and learning it and so on. So first thing that I want to do, and this is just so that I can give people a chance to sort of file in and sort of get ready with the stream. I wanted to talk a little bit about sort of my day and why I'm late and all of that. And that seems just like open a blog, idiot. That's kind of like one of those things you might sort of want to respond to that way. But it's partly just related to a couple things that will be interrupting the broadcast. So, there are things I'd like people to know, but it's not going to be a big deal. We'll introduce the game a little bit. I wanted to go over the Steam page because this is something I've been debating on doing for new games that I play, which is to sort of say, what does the developer think this game is about? Like, how are they positioning it to people? And part of this is because Vanguard Master shared their Kickstarter page with us. And so I figured that I know there's some of you who aspire to be game developers. There are some of you who are game developers. And I thought it might actually be kind of interesting to sort of see how a game is presented in those first moments where you're potentially making a decision to buy or play it, compared to sort of what the impressions of the game are after playing. So I may not do that for everything, but I thought that this might be an interesting thing to try for us. And then after sort of the introduction and the preliminary remarks and all of that, we'll jump into the game. My intention is to be the tutorial. I believe the game says that the tutorial would take about an hour, which of course in System Chalk times means that it'll probably take the whole broadcast for me. But I'll put it to you this way. I don't go out of my way to drag my feet on things. If a conversation is interesting or I feel like it needs, the time to be dealt with, well or correctly, or if somebody has something that, they want to say, I'd like to give them the chance and the time to say that. In ideal situations, obviously, if things get heated, then it's more likely that there will be some kind of closure imposed. But just generally try not to freak out too much in terms of making a particular milestone in terms of a playthrough. So just my day-to-day stuff. As some of you know, I've been struggling with sleep a little bit, so I actually wound up sleeping. So first of all, I went to bed very, very late, but I also wound up waking up quite late as well. And so, I think the only meal I've had has been breakfast, but I don't feel particularly hungry given the hour that I ate it at. And so one of the things I was hoping to I was hoping to do a lot more sort of reading and just going around and doing stuff today, but that didn't really happen. I was going to say that, but one of the side effects of this, so the reason I'm mentioning this is that there's a couple of things that are slightly time sensitive, and it's mostly just in terms of like managing things that are on charge and just otherwise like trying to keep on top of some of the stuff. So like, okay, maybe I should go back a little bit. I have been increasingly so number one, we're all kind of in work from home. My work from home period seems to be ending, unfortunately, which also really sucks because there's been a bunch of people who just got COVID in my workplace and they're still insisting people come in. Obviously not with COVID, but like it really is the case where the evidence seems to be that at least in my region, or specifically my region as relates to the place I'm going to be working, the numbers are actually going up, but they are pushing ahead despite this very clear danger. Needless to say, I'm pretty unhappy with my my workplace for that, but I can complain about it a lot, but unless I actually take the action of quitting, that complaining doesn't necessarily mean anything. But for a lot of us, we've been working in a work from home environment, and that can on its own be a little bit of a challenge just in terms of, I don't know, like basic work ethic and getting things done. So I've definitely keep strange hours for, compared to most people anyway. I do tend to work better late. But one thing I do need to confess, and it's, the old Benjamin Franklin quote, early to bed, early to rise. Like one of the reasons why I like that advice and why I think it's generally good is that if I, am in a flow state, or if I am, otherwise managing my time well or doing something good. So, I'm programming something, I'm writing something, I am getting some effective study done. That late night time is actually well spent, I think. But it is also true that it's much easier in late night time for that time to be spent on sort of entertainment, playing a video game, watching a Twitch stream, watching a movie. And there's nothing wrong with leisure time. But what it does mean is that more and more, it's a subtle way, I tend to find at least, it's a subtle way in which the kind of proportions of time that you're spending on things that you probably want to do. And I'm not even arguing here in terms of like your work hours, right? Like you're going to work your shift, everybody's got to, put food on the table, right? But just in terms of like what you do to sort of give yourself your rounded life, right? You probably don't want it to be all about video games. What I've tended to find is that if I am not careful, those late night hours can stop being like, they might be assigned for me catching up on things that I want to do, like writing. But what they're actually spent doing are doing things that aren't really either my best work or they're not kind of the work I intend to be doing at all. And essentially what happens is that the later time I get up, the later time I start, it just means that there are fewer and fewer hours in which I'm actually able to do the things that I value, but maybe require a little bit of effort on my part to build and maintain. But the other thing I've been really conscious about is sleep. And obviously all of the research that and I mean, like one of the problems with kind of research nowadays is that everybody's got to sort of publish novel results, and people are trying to sell newspapers. And so sometimes less careful research is taken up by news outlets and presented as a big fact. So, if you read enough newspapers, I mean, coffee is simultaneously the best thing for you and something that will kill you. And I'm not ridiculously health conscious, but it's very clear that one very common theme that's coming up is more and more research on sleep and the idea of long-term effects of lack of sleep. And, given the fact that I have a tendency towards working late on my own, but I also do have a day job, I am increasingly conscious of that. And so one of the things that I sort of tried to do for today was, made sure I got a proper night's sleep. And also to make sure that sort of tonight I don't go to bed too late. But that does have some consequences just in terms of also trying to make sure that I'm getting everything done. So with all of that in mind, I'm on a somewhat tight timeline. It's why I'm late broadcasting now. But it's also going to mean that there's a bunch of interruptions that are going to happen on the stream, which I'd prefer not to have happen. But it's mostly me just kind of keeping on top of things and making sure I get things done. Now, I realize it's been like 10 minutes, and that should be long enough for people to kind of come into the broadcast and get going. I haven't actually seen... Oh, hey, Tikri. You sleep in shifts 3 to 4 hours, then up for a few, and then another 3 or 4 hours of sleep. It's not particularly efficient. Oddly enough, I think there's a monastery in... So there's I haven't seen this documentary. I'd like to. I think it's called Into Great Silence, and it's... I think the Carathusan monks in La Grande Chartreuse. Anyways, there's a monastery. Apparently, that is actually their sleep schedule. It's very little sleep in small gaps. But essentially, what this documentary filmmaker, I think, had wanted to do this documentary, and the monastery said they were not yet ready, but they would let him know when they were. And sorry, the big thing about this one is that there's no speaking at all at this place, apparently. And I think like 11 years later, they contacted him and said, if he wants to do his documentary, then they're ready. So like, again, this is something I'd really love to see because, it's obviously a world that I'm not going to be able to really know on my own. But man, like hearing those kinds of hours, hearing that kind of sleep schedule, that's tough. Also, it's very good to see you. Was you had a tweet earlier today. Was your tweet a reference to Paranoia, the tabletop RPG? Because it felt like it, but maybe I'm just reading too carefully into it. So I'm really thirsty today, so. But yeah, anyways, I didn't mean to, so I didn't necessarily want to spend like 10 minutes talking about this stuff, but with that in mind, trying to keep on top of my sleep, trying to, again, I'm not particularly health conscious, but I would like to at least avoid obviously terrible things for me. And one of the consequences for that is going to be a few more interruptions today than I maybe would want or intend. But I'll do my best to sort of signpost them and move ahead. For sure, we did a one shot of it tonight as we were down half your players. Oh, sorry to hear that. How did you enjoy it? Paranoia, apparently the edition, I think I got it in like a used bookstore somewhere. Apparently the edition that I wound up with is very poorly received. And I've never actually played it. I just really liked the idea of a funny 1984. But I don't know. I think this has come up a couple of times. I'd like to do more tabletop RPGs than I actually have done, but I'm too disagreeable to be in a room with a bunch of people. But yeah, anyways, personal stuff aside, let's talk about this game. So Cube Games reached out to me shortly after I did Old World. Well, did Old World sort of to coincide with the Steam update. And they actually did something that I really like, and I kind of wish more developers would do. So I'm obviously a small channel, and it's to give you an idea of how tough independent game developers have it. Um, I like I still tend to get more key like requests to stream a game, or like offers for a key than I can realistically manage. So just to give you an idea, like look at someone like me who I think by most I still get people like there's someone who has fewer viewers than me who decided to like try and pull the number of viewers card in terms of I don't know, whatever kind of measuring contest they were trying to do. I thought that was very amusing. But yeah, like suffice to say, I don't think anybody necessarily looks at the channel as an idea for success, which is not to say that I have a big hang up about it or that I necessarily think that I'm unsuccessful. But I'm certainly not the sort of person who a lot of developers are going to be falling over themselves to get to play their game. And I have actually noticed that the number of concurrent viewers is something that will get in the way sometimes of getting access to games that I think might be a good fit. But the reason why I wanted to highlight this fact is that, again, to give you an idea in terms of how difficult it is in some cases for independent creators to be able to just sort of break through and get people's attention. I would love to kind of stream every key that I get, but just by sheer numbers, like even aside from interest, because most of the stuff that is offered, I can actually see some kind of an angle where I'm like, yeah, I could see why this might be interesting to try. But when I'm given a key and like when I broadcast or when I agree to broadcast something, I like to try and do a good job of it. Like I try to do more than one broadcast. I try to engage with the game and sort of see what someone's trying to do. And so one of the things that will tend to not really get any kind of follow-up from me. So if somebody like directly addresses me and it's very clear that this is something with sort of a personal connection, I am probably going to respond at the very least, just to say it's like, hey, I just to let you know I'm quite busy right now, but if you're still interested, I can let you know when I'm free, or I'm sorry, I don't think this is a very good fit, but I appreciate, like, essentially I want to acknowledge the effort that someone put in. There is also the unfortunate tendency for people to basically give you an offer to apply to broadcast a game. That is the fastest way for me to put someone on a block list, because I've had more than a couple of times where essentially I was given, I was given an invitation to apply, and it's like, surely you can do enough of your homework to decide if I'm a good fit. Like, usually what those forms will involve is about 15 minutes of me filling out stuff to find out that that's going to go into some Twitch API, and they'll look at the concurrent views and say, oh no, this isn't a good fit. They don't have 50 concurrent views or whatever. Like Paradox does this now. That's one of the reasons I don't do Paradox games anymore. For a while I was able to sort of email people and sort of make the case, like, I've been doing the game for about 2 years. I'd like to continue doing it, but currently with this standard, I'm not able to do so. And the reason why I'm not doing Paradox again is that this time when that happened, they said, sure, reach out after the thing came out. I set aside time specifically to do Stellaris, and then when I reached out, they just ghosted me. And like I'm sure at some point someone said, no, you're not allowed to give any more keys out or something like that. But to at least acknowledge that something has changed, rather than sort of leave me, I sent a second follow-up. And again, like respectfully worded, there's no point in being mean to people. But, I still haven't heard back. So it's like, okay, well, I've got other stuff I can play. I just really wish that somebody had bothered to just say, thank you for your time, but we're going in a different direction, as opposed to just sort of like, okay, we're not, we don't have the conviction to say no. Not that I want to sound bitter or anything. But yeah, like just, again, there is definitely something to be said in terms of just the way that you approach people and the time that you put in. So with that in mind, if somebody sends me an email and it's clear that this is something that they have done a bit of homework on, they're like, we'd specifically like you to do our game. This is really good because that indicates to me, like if someone has made that suggestion, there'll be viewers who say, I think you'd love game X, or, I'd really like it if you played, game Y. And that's not always going to be a good fit. But that at least is an indication that someone has an idea of what you're about, and it sort of shows that they've put some thought into it. The one drawback with some viewer-based recommendations are that sometimes if somebody likes a broadcast for the personality as opposed to the games that they play, you have this idea where it's like, this thing that I like A combined with this thing that I like B, usually my favorite game, will be awesome. But it turns out that, A and B aren't actually a good fit. So, there's a particular game I really don't like, and it's a very popular game. And it's probably just a bad match thing. I don't think it's a bad game, like in terms of everybody's mistaken and they think this terrible thing is good. But I'll be honest, I don't know why people like it. As a consequence, if somebody were to say, oh yeah, I'd really love to see it if you'd play that game, I'm inevitably just going to wind up really disappointing people that way. Generally for the developer ones, I think they have a better idea in terms of the qualities that they want in terms of their overall game. So if they say, hey, particularly if they say, hey, I liked it when you did X. So someone says, hey, I saw you do Cultist Simulator. We think this might be a good fit. Or, hey, we liked your old world stream. Would you like to do this? And that's what happened with Imperiums Greek Wars. So this is immediately going to get my attention, right? Which is to somebody took the time to say, even if in the end they're just doing a search for similar games and they're taking a look at the broadcasters who have done games that they think are similar to it, at the very least, I know that I'm not being given an invitation to apply for something, which to me is important, because again, there's just only so much time that I can do. And if there are people who are not making me jump through those hoops, why don't I just spend the time on theirs? And if I can't reach theirs, then why would I spend the time on the people who want me to do an application for something, right? It's just I don't know. It's a efficiency thing, I suppose. But with the unfortunate reality, now you can sort of think back to when Old World came out on Steam. And it's much like what I'd said at the time, which is this game looks really interesting. And I actually really appreciate that you took the time to think that this is a good fit. And unfortunately, I am absolutely slammed with stuff to do right now. And they said, okay, here's a key, you can stream it when you like, which I, again, really appreciate. And it's immediately off the top of it has made me want to do well by Cube Games. To a certain extent, right, spending 20 minutes not playing their game and talking about personal stuff is maybe not respecting it. But it's actually something that I just wanted to sort of signpost here, which is that I actually really, really appreciate how Cube Games went about this, because I had never heard of Imperium's Greek Wars. I think there are some things about this that actually make it a particularly good fit for me. So I'm slightly disappointed in myself for not having heard of this. As you can see from the Steam page, it was released in July 30th, 2020. But I'm actually really glad that they brought it to my attention, because this really does seem to be the sort of thing that I not only am personally interested in, but I would be interested in covering. And so I actually felt really, really bad that I'd known I had Songs of Conquest as well as Out There on top of course, the games that I already play, Brace Yourself Games, Industries of Titan, and Phantom Brigade, along with Old World. And then, of course, there was Terra Invicta, which was an opportunity that was sort of time-sensitive that came up. So this is the one that I've been talking about in terms of the thing that I've wanted to get to, and I was struggling to put into the queue. And it's one of the big reasons for that is that I really do feel that Cube have gone above and beyond in terms of doing sort of that kind of outreach, and it's something that I personally appreciate. And more importantly, I actually think it's also an indicator that this is something that a lot of you may be interested in, which is also one of the reasons why I wanted to take the time to also sort of talk about how this game is being presented. But with that in mind, consider this also your disclosure that I have in fact been given a key for this game for promotional purposes. I am, of course, probably broadcasting this later than Cube might have wanted. And for that, I do apologize. And I really do appreciate the fact that they were quite patient with me on this. But the good news is that I do intend to return to it. I don't know if I'll be able to make it sort of like an every Friday entry or an every Monday entry or something like that. But I am definitely going to be returning to it every once in a while. And I think what I'll do here is I'll talk a bit about I'll do the introduction here on the Steam page. I'll talk about one small hang-up I have about streaming this game today in particular, and then we'll actually be able to jump into the game itself. So why is this thing interesting? First of all, you've got the title. This guy, maybe it's not so obvious here, but this guy is missing an eye, so you'd make a guess here that this is Philip of Macedon, who we talked about during Old World. And sorry to Cree, I did see your early message. Rules are treason, so you don't actually know what version you played, but you had a lot of fun. That is really, really good. I maybe didn't appreciate... I know that you had done some tabletop role-playing, but I actually didn't know how much you played. So like I know you played Vampire, but maybe what I didn't appreciate was like I think the more we've talked, you've probably mentioned about 4 or 5 different games or rule systems that you've played. So it's actually really cool. It's one of the things I kind of look forward to hearing from you for is another interesting role-playing setting. So apologies, I meant to bring that up before, but yeah, anyways. Imperiums Greek Wars, a unique combination of turn-based 4X and historical grand strategy with a mythological twist. Explore the ancient world and build a world-leading civilization. Survive, expand, conquer, and win. Currently very positive on Steam, 83% in terms of response. It was released July 30th, 2020. There is a free DLC for this, Imperiums Troy. There's also a paid DLC, Imperium's Age of Alexander. So that was released in October of last year. And there is another, the developer's playing, by the way, twitch.tv/Cube Games. I don't know if they're playing on Twitch as well. My understanding for Twitch is that if you, 73 hours? I'm going to guess they probably, probably are not live on. Anyways, Cube Games does have a Twitch account, which I'd meant to bring up earlier. But I will, of course, mention that it is currently on sale. The Steam sale is going on, so it's Canadian $20, down from its normal, $19.99, down from the usual $39.99 Canadian. There is a complete edition. You get a slightly higher discount off of that by bundling everything up. You can spend $32.45. Again, if you're Canadian, to get Age of Alexander. And then there is another expansion coming up, Rome versus Carthage. I believe that is listed as Q3. Well, it says it right there at the top, Q3 2022. So there will be another release coming up. Now, I was given a key for the base game, so I can't say anything about Age of Alexander. But again, this is going to be my first look at the game anyway, so I suspect it's probably better for me to jump in at the start. Takri says, you love tabletop RPGs and have source books for way more than you've actually gotten to play. I do too. So I think I've got a source book for a game called Conspiracy X, which seems really cool, but I don't think I'll ever play it. I may need to refill my water. Love tabletop. You have a source book for your war that you've actually gotten into. Your Monday, Friday group does a bunch of random ones when you have too few players for your regular games. I've always wondered what the ideal tabletop size is. One thing I should maybe start doing is like listening to more podcasts or series, because I realize that there is like a genre now of people playing RPGs for an audience. Okay, anyways, moving on. There is a Discord for the game. I probably should join that at some point. But let's also go to about the game. So I think there's been a little bit of research in terms of how, well, I say research. It's a kind of a marketing newsletter, Chris Zuhosky, who basically looks at, I think he paid a bunch of people to just sort of see how they browse. And it'll be like a couple of seconds on a trailer, look at the capsule. If they're interested, they might scroll down, but usually they'll just jump to the next thing inside the queue. So this would usually be around this point, you're like, oh, that looks like Philip. Oh, I see large men walking on a map, and it's 3D, and it's got uplifting music. This seems like something I might be interested in. Ooh, it's on sale. It's half off. All right. And right around the point that you're deciding, okay, I'll probably think about picking this up, you'll go down and read the about this game section. So, Imperiums Greek Wars is a unique combination of turn-based 4X and historical grand strategy with a mythological twist. Most games 4 is pretty comfy for the players and the GM. You couldn't run for any more, but but less feels too empty. Yeah, I was kind of wondering, because you were talking about if you're missing half your players. I have to guess that they're... Well, I guess also Paranoia is almost like a PvP tabletop RPG. So maybe it's a little different with a smaller number. Inspired by our previous award-winning title, Aggressors Ancient Rome, we bring you a fresh look at the Greco-Persian world of schemers, warmongers, and ruthless politicians. This merciless world is enhanced by myths and stories about heroic deeds and hidden treasures as only the Greeks were able to imagine. Greco-Persian world. The game starts in 359 BC when Philip II of Macedon takes the throne. Macedonia at the time is a backwater on the edge of the Hellenic world, but Philip is an ambitious man. He has a dream to become leader of the whole of Greece, a dream that he will follow until his death. Choose one of 30 playable factions ranging from mighty Sparta or Athens, ambitious Macedonia, slowly declining, I'm always bad at this, Achaemenid Empire and its power-hungry satrapies, to a number of smaller Greek city-states and groups of semi-nomadic societies living on the outskirts of the Hellenic world. Lead your nation to glory if you can. Lead, rule, and conquer. Your task is to do more than survive. You are a divine ruler, supreme military commander, and political leader who seeks glory and prosperity for all your subjects. Lead them to magnificent victories, manage the economy on all levels, and provide successful livelihoods as well as stable and just government. It is not a task for the weak. All problems rest upon your shoulders. Every crisis is a test of your political and military prowess. Decisiveness, tactical thinking, political shrewdness, and above all, an adventurous spirit is what will cause one person to stand out, to rise as a star shining through the darkness for millennia to come. Historical immersion. The Greco-Persian world of Imperiums is a faithful representation of historical reality. Political relations, animosities, and ambitions take a unique... sorry, I read that incorrectly. Also, I don't know if you can hear this, but the fireworks are going off now. Happy Canada Day, everybody! The Greco-Persian world of Imperiums is a faithful representation of historical reality, political relations, animosities, and ambitions. Take a unique opportunity to experience your own on your own shoulders, the weight of responsibility as the chosen one. As leader, you can follow your own path or take advice and guidance from dozens of nation-specific objectives. Experience the ancient Greek world in such a detail as never before. Myths and legends. Ancient people believed in myth and legend. It was part of their reality. Those adventurous enough can send their generals in the footsteps of ancient heroes to find the Golden Fleece or untie the Gordian knot. Unveil the truth of some of the stories and myths of the Greek world. Face the opponents. Your opponents will be unforgiving. If you want more of human slyness and unexpected turns, join a multiplayer game and challenge other players in a race to victory. New worlds. The universe of Imperiums offers an endless number of realms. Imagine a world to your liking and let us bring it to you. Whatever your choice, enter with a clear mind and prove that you can not only survive, but build an empire worthy of the title. Take advantage of the imagination of others and explore worlds they created. Go even a step further. Let yourself be inspired as creator whose ideas shape others' worlds. I have a feeling that this is a reference to a map editor, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Learn with ease. It is not shameful to take advice from time to time. You are not alone in this cruel world. There is always guidance to explain, provide context, offer recommendations. Let yourself be guided by your intuition and logic, and you will soon become a master. Paranoia was good for the two of us. Pendragon, Arthurian Knights, and Cold City's Eldritch Spies are others you tend to do when there's only two. And I've never heard of those two before. So, okay. So that's kind of the introduction of Imperium's Greek Wars. This seems interesting to me on its own. But that is how it's presented. The only thing that I'm going to say that gives me a small hang up, and one reason why I was a little reluctant to stream today, is this. As we mentioned, the tutorial is set in the game to be about an hour long. And the funny thing is that I really like games like this. But it's also true that I struggle a little bit sometimes to find the time to really get into games like this now. So I love Civilization, and I understand Civilization quite well. One game I've really wanted to get into, and I've struggled a bit to find the time for, is Shadow Empires, which is a very big, complicated sci-fi strategy game with a huge manual and a somewhat impenetrable UI. And it's also true that Imperiums Greek Wars also has a manual. It's 218-page manual. So again, these are the sorts of things where I'm like, oh yeah, I'm totally into this. I really want to play, a game with a big manual and lots of exciting things to move on. But particularly because I'm going to be, broadcasting this, and I'd like to have a good idea of what's going on. I was wanting to spend some time with the manual and see kind of how it works before I played. But of course, like I said, it's taken a while for me to actually get into this game now. So what we're going to be doing tonight, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to take the time to sort of set this all up before jumping in and playing, is that I may be playing in sort of suboptimal conditions, that I may be jumping into the tutorial where I should actually be taking some time and reading the manual first. Another game, actually, I think that's a decent example of one where you probably... So I think Shadow Empires would be a good example of something you should read the manual before playing, but also Dominions 5 or Conquest of Elysium 4. Those are games that I definitely think have put quite a bit of time and care into presenting their manuals. But obviously the idea of reading a book before playing a game is a very old-fashioned one, and it's one that I sort of need to be able to learn to do, basically. So that's the one small hang-up I have on this. So this is definitely going to be sort of a first look for me in terms of Imperium's Greek Wars. But you've all been patient enough with me to do that introduction, so let's jump in. And I mentioned before, I am struggling a little bit as far as my streaming setup is concerned. So I can't actually get this to be picked up as like a regular game in OBS. So it's one of the reasons why I took all this time to talk about the things at the beginning of the broadcast and then jump into the game. Because like I said, I think the only tabs that are open are like Wikipedia and math. But on the odd chance that, I've got my secret spy stuff open in the other window, I kind of want it to be a little more ordered in terms of how I present things. I'm sorry, the fireworks are really distracting. Also, one of the charging things that I need to do is starting up, so I'm just gonna walk away. I like the introduction. Actually, no, I'm gonna hang out with the introduction. I'll maybe get my... Ancient Greece, 359 BC. The world changes. A young king takes power. And changes history forever. Relive the story of Philip II of Macedon. I think I might be getting overwhelmed by the music a little bit. We'll see what the in-game music is like. But yeah, I'm going to take a second here just to get my charge done, and then we'll be able to put some quality time into the tutorial, and I might play around with the game settings a little bit. I will see you all in a minute at the most. Okay, sorry about that. So, this volume level seems to be quite a bit. I think these are the defaults, actually, now that I think of it. Okay, we'll run with this and move on. Now, one thing I wanted to talk about in terms of introductory remarks for the game, and not just like the background of how I got to this game, but rather what's going on. One thing that I think is really interesting about the choice of setting here is this particular part, like the focus on Philip II, I think is a neat choice, just because it's the best analogy that I can sort of draw is the 7 Years' War, which I appreciate is a like the reason why I think the two are comparable is because they seem to be really, really interesting points of history that are severely underrepresented in terms of either different forms of media or different, or in terms of discussion. Now, the problem that I have most of the time when I go into sort of these kinds of backgrounds is that, well, one, I'm kind of ranty, but number two, a lot of this stuff I'm kind of doing from memory based on some different types of reading that I've done at different times. So inevitably, I'm going to kind of wind up making some mistakes. It's definitely not my intention to misinform people. But on the other hand, like, I also don't necessarily want to be responsible for sort of, kind of perpetuating a misapprehension, particularly on things that are not... Can you perpetuate a misapprehension? I don't think that's quite how that works. But anyways, I don't want to be sort of responsible for adding more noise when there's something that's when it's something that's already not very well understood. But on the other hand, I think it's helpful to kind of talk about why I think these things are interesting, and that's definitely something that factored into my decision to play this game. So, again, just kind of keep in mind, I'm doing my best in terms of my understanding as best as I have it, but I am human. I'm not a historian. In fact, the closest I took for history was actually a classical philosophy course. So it was a proper classics course, but the history that I know tends to be a little bit more domain specific as opposed to having actually properly read. Well, I mean, like, I've read history, but like I've not properly studied it. It's just I'll read things that I'm interested in. But the reason why I wanted to sort of compare this a little bit to the 7 Years' War is that these both kind of the time of Philip II and the expansion of Macedonia and the 7 Years' War seem to be really interesting and actually very important periods of history. And I have a suspicion that both of these are less considered. I mean, again, if you're a professional historian, chances are you will know of, or maybe not even professional historian, but like if you're into history, you'll know about these things. But I think these have a little bit less real estate in the popular imagination because it's they sort of lie in close proximity to other really significant events that do have a lot of mind share. And so often when we tend to consider these things, we tend to consider them sort of in relation to these other large events. Takri says, history was your least favorite subject in school, and then you got into an advanced placement class for it and hated it. Oh, that sucks. Yeah, I mean, it's tricky too when you're... out of curiosity, do you still feel that way about history, or have you kind of found a way to have an interest in the subject now? Because one thing I found for myself with mathematics was I don't necessarily think I was terrible about it in... I don't necessarily think I was terrible at it in sort of elementary/middle school. Later on, I sort of felt I either kind of gave up on it or I lost interest or basically definitely you can sort of see like a decline in terms of the grades. And like, again, I knew I was going to go work in film, so that wasn't a big issue, let's say. But then, when I was done with film and I go to university and then I fall in love with economics, and I was pretty sure once I got interested in econ that the stuff I was most interested in, I would only ever be able to do if I had a higher level degree, like if I went to grad school. And man, if you want to do economics in like any meaningful way, you got to know math. So that put a bit of a fire under me to sort of bridge that gap that I had. But also once I actually started getting to some higher level math courses, like basically once I stopped trying to grind out a number and once I actually got to appreciate it a little bit more in terms of a way of thinking and an approach, I actually really like the subject. I'm not a particularly good mathematician, but I really, really like it. Like I wish both earlier on I had put more effort into it, and I also sort of wish that I took up more math in university. I'm sure you don't have the brain for dates, but you don't hate history, which is you're just selective about which histories you look more into. Yeah, I mean, this is one of the challenges, right? The reason why I asked that is that I suspect, especially because there's going to be a test, that there's going to be a lot of emphasis placed on sort of dates. And it's not that it's not important. Like being able to come up with an order of things is helpful, but certainly, history tells you a lot about where you've come from and why the world is the way that it is. And it's something that we can learn from. I mean, it's, somewhat famously, James Mattis, the former Secretary of Defense, had an enormous library, which he would take around with him. And of course, when he is going to Iraq, he took the time to read. In fact, if I recall correctly, in one of his emails, he'd sort of said something, reading this stuff, it's Alexander the Great would maybe not be particularly surprised by the sort of things that we're running into right now. I might be mistaking exactly which conflict he was referring to, but I'll see if I can find the email for a future broadcast. But in that particular case there, obviously, Mattis is not necessarily concerning himself with a date. I think he's drawing much more direct lessons from the past experience. And I mean, to a certain extent, history can be presented in a very dynamic way. It's full of lots of really cool stories. I mean, I think a lot of our fantasy, if you kind of rub away the green face paint, the orcs are this one nation or empire or civilization, and the elves, it's like, okay, yeah, well, they seem a little bit like these. Like, it's not that hard once you read enough history to sort of be able to see where these things come from and like the mappings that you can make. But some people, I feel, when they're taught a given subject, they're sort of taught to dislike it more than anything. And as a consequence, it's like when you have to do literature and people are teaching you like poetry, and sometimes literature classes get reduced down to like trying to decipher this absolutely bizarre code that, an author was, apparently just decided to apply to this thought that they had. And if you don't find if you don't have the right mechanism for deciphering, you're going to get like a C- in the class. And that's definitely not going to teach you, to love literature, as enjoyable as it is. Math came pretty easy to you. You took 2 different classes 1 year so that you could get into an advanced one the next year. Oh, that's really cool. So I'm going to have a bunch of questions for you in terms of getting my skills back up. But anyways, to bring it back to Imperium's Greek Wars. So the reason why, like I said, in terms of comparing the sort of rise of Macedon and the 7 Years' War, I sort of feel like in these cases, like in the 7 Years' War, you have not that far away the American and then the French revolutions, right? So you can kind of see why, even though it's probably more accurate, like obviously when we refer to the World War I, we refer to the Great War, right? The Entente, that sort of stuff. And of course, nowadays, we'll also call it World War I in relation to the Second World War. So even then, right, another example in terms of how these things can be colored in relation to their other, in terms of their other, in terms of later and larger events. And this seems to be the case with, like in the case of the 7 Years' War, I think actually Churchill might have even referred to it as truly the First World War. We can call it World War Zero. The other way you can sort of think of it is this big like series finale of this, this conflict between France and England for sort of global domination. But needless to say, like it's a fascinating period of history, and it's got a few different names. So it's French and Indian War, or I think if you're in Quebec, it's like the War of British Conquest or something like that. But in any case, it's one that's very, very interesting, and it's one that chances are you may not know as well as sort of two events that people see potentially, that events prior to it, including the 7 Years' War, might have led to. But chances are people will understand things like the American Revolution and the French Revolution a little bit more than that one. So what about Macedonia? Well, Philip II had a son named Alexander, and pretty much everybody's heard of Alexander the Great, and certainly a tremendously capable military commander, very wide-ranging empire, and of course also his early death and the conflicts that happened after as a result of his death, sort of the empire breaking apart and his generals fighting. It's also sort of fair to say that it also, just before it, you have got two other major conflicts that are before, that happened before it, that also have a lot of mind share. So you have got, the very famous battle at Thermopylae, where you've got, we did that in Old World, where the Spartans sort of hold off the Persians for as long as they can. And then following the Greeks being able to push back the Persian invasion, you've got the Peloponnesian Wars, the Peloponnesian War, where Athens and Sparta, go to war. Effectively, where there isn't sort of this unified Greece, where essentially you've got these two powers, Athens and Sparta. I mean, there's a bunch of alliances and all of that going on, but effectively this terrible war that happens in Greece, and actually causes quite a bit of misery, and it, like, it's just one of these obviously no war is very. There's no really. I don't think it's fair. I think it's fair to say there's no such thing as a good war, but like. One of the things that's so interesting about it is just, to a certain extent, like you kind of look at it, it's like, oh, what a senseless mess. And you sometimes also wonders, like, isn't it possible for there to have been another way? And what's interesting is that Mark Herman has made a board game called The Peloponnesian War. And it's, I think, actually intended to be played as a single-player game, although I believe you can play it as a two-player game. And what's so interesting about it is that you start as one side, and your goal is to, so when you're playing as one side, if you can end the war quickly, you score very high, you do well. But it's also true that at the halfway point, you switch sides. So if you're playing Sparta, you'll switch around and you'll play Athens. The collected forces. The people who will care about that distinction will know I'm referring to a kind of group of allies. But and so in this particular case here, right, you start with one incentive in the game to end the, to do your conquest and to succeed. And then you flip around in terms of the game, and you essentially, if you cannot end the war quickly, the scoring of the game then sort of becomes how much of the protracted conflict you can avoid. And so you have this short-term goal of, the sort of thing that a ruler might want. And that particular set of incentives actually brings about the possibility that in the long run, for the overall game, if you have to wind up going to sort of that final scoring, can actually lead to something where you get a particularly bad score in the game, because in the end you made the mistake that happened historically, which is just this long and protracted conflict for seemingly little gain. But in any case, whether, obviously this is a little detached from Imperium's Greek Wars, but it's fair to say that those moments in history, preceding it, get quite a bit more attention than Macedonia. And when we think about Macedonia, we tend to think about it mostly in terms of Alexander the Great and his conquests. And of course, there's plenty of reasons why, because it is truly a very large and impressive accomplishment, and it's something that inspired many leaders following. But it's also actually fair to say that the rise of Macedonia is actually a really interesting story in and of itself. Philip is an interesting character. It's an example of a nation. So maybe the better way to sort of explain everything that's going on, like the story, we can maybe start in that movie with like the naked guys who like fight a bunch of like, other guys who are led by like a giant naked guy, and like there's lots of slow motion shots of rock hard abs and like spears pointing. So after that movie's done, that leads eventually to the Peloponnesian War, where basically the naked cape guys fight the other people who were there to help out, and they kind of made fun of them because they weren't very strong, but it actually turns out they really were strong, and they had a really good navy. And for a while they were led by this guy called Pericles, who's really interesting, and he gave Abraham Lincoln some cool ideas about something to say at Gettysburg. But Athens did lose, and there was this government known as the 30 Tyrants that was installed. Interestingly enough, there are some suggestions that the political climate sort of brought on by that war was something that... So the suggestion is that the political climate sort of from that war ultimately contributed to the death of Socrates, that there's sort of this feeling that there were a number of politically connected people who maybe there was a certain amount of popular frustration with, but because they were well connected, because they were influential, they couldn't necessarily be touched. But Socrates was perceived to maybe be too close to the 30 tyrants, although there is a story, I believe, where he was asked to sort of, I think it was to point someone out for an execution, and he declined to go. I really should remember that story better. But in fact, I don't think this is supposed to be Socrates, but it might be. But in any case, there's a suggestion here that it may be that his execution was partly the fact that he was someone who was not necessarily politically connected enough, or at least was politically indifferent enough, that people could sort of project that anger onto him and, sort of satisfy whatever they couldn't through people who are maybe more directly responsible for their anger. The main point that I'm trying to make out of this is just to simply say that, Sparta is able, again, they're able to sort of win the Peloponnesian War. They're able to install the 30 tyrants, but they only last for about a year. And so maybe it's not kind of the outcome that you would necessarily, you would think when you're sort of thinking about these large alliances sort of fighting and one side gaining the upper hand over the other. Another example that I could give for you in terms of how the world has sort of changed is that if you kind of think back to ancient Greece, right, classical Greece, before Alexander the Great, and you sort of think of as like, well, what are some of these groups or nations, or city-states, however you want to think about them, like, what are some of the names that you can think of as like big or powerful or important, right? And you're like, okay, well, Athens, clearly, right? You got to pick that one. And you're like, yeah, but Sparta, right? I saw the movie with the naked guys in the capes. Spartans, yeah, I love them. They're the reason I like work out every day. I'm gonna guess if there's any of you who are into history who haven't, who haven't like completely abandoned the stream at this point. I'm gonna guess that there's very few of you, if any, who might have said Thebes. But it's true that at this point in the game, Thebes is sort of the really powerful one. And again, it's just kind of one of these examples in terms of where, if you have certain events that have got large mind share, they can sort of lead to maybe some different conceptions in terms of what's actually going on in a particular period of time. So I suppose if I were to just take these on their own, say it's like, okay, well, that's all well and good, but obviously history changes, and we know that Alexander's going to, kind of go in and let everyone know who's boss. But this is actually also where this becomes, in my opinion, a really interesting and worthwhile subject on its own. And this is the rise of Macedonia. To me, it's the simple fact that you have like the list of people who you think are going to win, right? Who's the strongest? Who's the one who's going to wind up ruling the world, I guess. And you'll look at that first kind of fight between Persia and the Greeks, and you see a big Persian empire, and you see a bunch of Greeks who just cannot get along no matter what. You're like, well, obviously the empire is going to win, right? The Greeks have never defeated the Persians, but then they do. That is a fairly significant. I mean, even the very first defeat of the Persians was a very big event. But it was certainly not the end of that war. And likewise, if you take a look in this region, it's like who's going to wind up if there's going to be one group that sort of winds up controlling everything. Who would you put your money on? And you'll have, someone say Athens. You'll have someone say Sparta. You'll have someone say Thebes. Nobody's really going to take a look up in the north and say, oh yeah, the Macedonians are totally going to take over. But that's exactly what happens. And it's Philip II who does. But again, because he was assassinated, and because just after it's his son that achieves this great empire that winds up being, something that is studied today. And I know, so sometimes the history I know of this just comes from the Oliver Stone movie, which is probably not going to be the best source for knowledge. But to give you an idea, at the time, there were actually two rival Alexander the Great movies. I believe Baz Luhrmann, who did Moulin Rouge, he did an adaptation of Romeo and Juliet with Leonardo DiCaprio. I think that was the one that made Leonardo DiCaprio Leonardo DiCaprio. I'm pretty sure that was one of his breakout movies, if not the breakout movie. But Leonardo DiCaprio was supposed to play Alexander in the Baz Luhrmann adaptation. I think Baz Luhrmann's also doing the new Elvis movie that's out. But in any case, a subject clearly interesting enough to sort of there to be two rival film projects. Although I think it was kind of clear that Stones was going to move ahead, and so I don't think anybody wanted necessarily to have, the competing, the also ran film. So Luhrmann's project seemed to fall apart. But in any case, we if we're going to talk about Philip, we're going to talk about him as the father of this very successful son, and maybe we will see Alexander as sort of fulfilling the ambitions of his father, which again, probably true. But there is a story, I guess the one thing you can say is, like, why was Alexander in a position to be able to achieve what he did? And ultimately getting to the story of Macedon expanding and sort of becoming this, the winner of the contest for Greece, let's say, in my view, is an interesting story and one that should be told. So I realize it's been an hour. I'm going to try and make a marker on the YouTube video to just sort of say that there's a long introduction to this. But hopefully that will give you a reason as to why this is an interesting and worthwhile subject for a game, and why I'm excited to go into something like this. And we're going to take a look at the tutorial at the minimum, and if we can get through the tutorial, we'll definitely start a single player run on this. But I'm going to do what I can to at least get a good grip on this game. And then when it comes to sort of the meat of the experience, that I certainly have every intention of streaming this more than once. So.
Sparta and Athens have a venerable presence that has shaped our history, and neither will easily yield their place. Though Sparta lost its dominance a few decades ago after an earthquake, leading to Macedonia breaking away, and defeat under Theban spears, underestimating their will for reascendance would be a mistake. Military tradition is in their blood. They will not settle for second place at the Olympiad, nor diplomatic table, much less the battlefield. Athenian presence now stretches from Attica to far-flung colonies along our sea. They also control the Delian League. However, many allies resent Athenian hubris and treatment of them as slave nations. Outright rebellion may be nigh as other states seek to undermine them. Yet, while Sparta and Athens influenced our culture for centuries, another rival enters the amphitheater for the final act. Young Philip has taken the throne in Macedonia, his brother the king having recently fallen against barbarians. Though his fledgling kingdom struggles, Philip is fearless and ambitious. Oracles have prophesied that Hellenes will learn how one man can change the history of so many.
So, if I'd only just hit the tutorial, it probably would have had a much more concise summary of all that stuff that I talked about at the beginning. But what are you going to do? All right. Scenario begins. Ancient Greece, in a time long before it became known as Greece, was not yet even thought of as a cohesive nation, still a fragmented agglomeration of city-states spread across much more than just Hellas. Each continued its struggles against its neighbors, changing sides and quarreling even after the 27-year-long so-called Peloponnesian War, and long after the Hellenes united once to drive off the Persians. In the east, the Achaemenid inheritors of the Persian Empire, strive to keep thumbs upon its independence-minded collection of satrapies. To the north, in the foothills of the Balkans, barbarian tribes of Illyria and Thracia vie with Hellenic states for supremacy. Sparta, Athens, and Boeotia continue their rivalry, and now a new power is about to rise in the midst of all the conflict, Macedon. And I will talk a little bit about pronunciation. So I suck at pronunciation anyway, but I'm going to talk a little bit about where I think some of the differences may be coming from. But I realize I've talked about a lot of things that are not necessarily the game. Actually, one thing that may be of interest for you to create, some of this stuff actually comes up in Cultist Simulator. So a lot of the edge lore is actually referring to... So there's definitely references to the Achaemenid, and there's one of the histories in which Alexander is given a secret by the Persian king, and gives up on his conquest. So, I'm definitely not going to do a deep dive on Cultist Simulator lore as far as this, but actually this period of history does come up in the game that obviously I know you best for. So, I think I mentioned this in a video that I did this week, but it is actually surprising to know how much real history is in the game. It's very arcane history sometimes, but it is actually there, like the Merovine idol. So I'd actually known that there was a Roman city called Merovinium. What I didn't realize was that the reason it was called Merovinium is that there was actually a tribe called the Merovi, and it kind of refers to a dry lake where sort of the idols being thrown into this dried out lake. So I know that Merovinium was founded next to a lake, and that the lake is in fact drained out. I don't know if there have been idols found inside of it, but it does turn out that there was actually a tribe. So again, I knew the city Merovinium. When I looked it up, I did actually find out that there was a tribe called the Merovi, although they're usually called something different. So whether or not they threw idols inside of it, like the idea of the Merovingian idol is in fact referring to a real people from history. So it generally gives me the impression that a lot of the things that I think might be made up for the game, well, they're still made up in the sense that, so far as I can tell, the Mansis is not a real place. But it is kind of funny. It is kind of fun to just every once in a while sort of realize that just because it seems like it's made up, it might actually just be because it's not something that's referred to as often in terms of history. I think the Exile has a lot of that, actually. Macedonia is a large kingdom at the periphery of the region dominated by the Hellenic city-states, yet occupying a strategic position around the Gulf of Therma with access to the sea and rich gold mines, plus room to expand. While it has shed the Persian yoke, its position among the Hellenic powers is insecure. Seen as semi-barbaric, it is not strong enough economically or militarily to vie for hegemony, and on the political field, it plays only a secondary role. Despite this, it maintains an aggressive attitude towards its neighbors. Especially strained are relations with Athens and the Odrysian and Dardanian kingdoms and Kelly tribes to the north and east. Indeed, these conflicts have just cost Macedonia her king. A new monarch, Philip II, has taken the throne. Incidentally, I believe the brother who was killed by the barbarians had actually put his son as the next in succession, and that Philip was regent, but that Philip successfully kind of booted the son out and wound up taking over himself. Philip II has taken the throne, and while his plans are ambitious, Macedonia first needs to build an infrastructure and an army before it can join the fight for supremacy. Our military tradition allows you to draw upon experienced troops. Some newly recruited basic units can already have attack and defense improvements. Such a military advantage should not go to waste. The future of the nation is now in your hands. Honor the vision of our ancestors and continue in their great deeds. Your predecessor has already laid out some plans called objectives that can be found under this icon in the state menu or in the state window. Follow in their steps and fulfill your destiny. Players' objectives, populations, troops, colonists, workers. Large populations will be needed to support our grand expansion plans, but first we have to increase internal food production to be able to feed our people without relying too much on external sources. Northern League, Macedonia's position among Hellenic nations remains on the periphery. We will need to befriend and make a military pact with similar states in order to prove our worth to the rest of the world. Vengeance. Macedonia is in mourning. King Perdiccas, is dead in battle against the Illyrian tribes. His son is an infant, so it is now up to you to take up mantle and sword and seek vengeance upon the Dardanians. Military reforms. Macedonia is seen as a backward nation, but we are Hellenes after all. We will undoubtedly meet those who disagree with swords, but we need to prepare ourselves first. Advanced military units, elite training, and stronger city fortifications should be researched as a first step. Edessa and Aigai. Again, my apologies on pronunciation. While our nation mourns its king, we must see to the defense of Aigai and Edessa. Should either of those towns fall, our position would be grave indeed. Do whatever you can to ensure their security. And resources. If we were to drag Macedonia from the backwoods and shape her into a foremost nation of Hellenes, we will need to secure sufficient resources that can be obtained either through trade or exploitation of local natural resources, or both. So one thing that's not 100% clear to me right now, I do like they're giving me some objectives, but I will confess when it says get access to resources 0%, it's like, well, I'm not 100% sure what resources I should be following through on. And like 50% population objective, again, I'm not quite sure what the target is here, but it's, again, we're at the very start of the tutorial, so it will probably explain that stuff in a little bit. Also, before I go too much further in, I just wanted to talk. So I always feel a little bit bad when I hear one pronunciation as opposed to another. So I'm just going to give you a couple of examples as to why I think I say the ways I say them and why I think there's a distinction between the two. Now, I'm going to be clear, I am not a linguist, so I don't know if this is true or not. But I have a feeling why. I'm actually inconsistent in how I do it. I usually just, either I've learned the word or I've had to read it, and I do my best given how it is. But I'll briefly try to explain why I think there are some of the differences. So we should take the Ancient Kingdom, and then... Okay. So, Orpheus's wife... looking back, maybe this wasn't the best idea. So what I'm really looking for here is the Greek. Okay, yeah, here we go. So I think if we listen,
Macedonia.
There you go, right? The CE. Now, oddly enough, I normally say Eurydice, but I believe what most people will say is Eurydice. In fact, I think if you do a Google search, Eurydice.
Eurydice.
Eurydice, yeah. So, what's the difference here, right? Why is there the distinction between the two? And why would I say Eurydice where it clearly, it's actually hard to find one that says it the other way. And I think it comes down to this little devil right here, the kappa. So as far as I can tell, this is an actual k sound. But the way that it comes down to us with the CE, Eurydice, right? So I eventually just need, and this will actually come up because this is one of Philip's wives. So I'm really going to do my best to say Eurydice because I say Macedonia. But again, similar idea. You've got that. You got that capo there, right? It's not just a Twitch emote. And so I suspect what's happening here is that, I'm saying Macedonia. I'm sort of saying it how I think most English speakers would be saying it, where what I suspect Imperiums Greek Wars is doing is they're probably saying that might be a bit closer to how the Greeks might have pronounced it. At the very least, it's sort of keeping the sound of the kappa. So far as I can tell anyway, because I really know, I do have a Greek textbook, but I definitely don't know ancient Greek. But so far as I can tell, so where, at least for me, I think that's the best way I've been able to articulate the difference. And again, like I'd say Eurydice for the longest time, but most people, and thank you to Cree for the correction. But yeah, Eurydice is something that I need to probably start saying because it would be consistent with how I say all the other words like Macedon. So I am going to say Macedonia or Macedon. The game will say Macedon, and I realize I sound like a little bit of a dick for like pronouncing something different than how the game says it. And I think in this case here, it's just you kind of got to pick a lane and run with it. Hey, Elgrins, how you doing? You just try to say that, yeah, and that's it. Like, this is the drawback for me about learning so much of this stuff from reading, is that unless there's a pronunciation directly in the book, I can wind up hearing anything. What's the other thing I was going to say? Actually, there was apparently hegemony can be surprising to people if they're, I guess some people say hegemony. But apparently there's like another really wild way of pronouncing it if you've never heard the word before. That sounds different. But again, I think that's one that I probably heard before, so it was maybe surprised. I wonder if I can find that, because I saw it in a tweet at some point. I'm not going to spend like a ton of time looking it up, but why is everybody on Twitter talking about the pronunciation of hegemony, and am I mispronouncing it? Why is there so many people online who are trying to find, who are only just hearing this word for the first time? Was this said by someone famous recently? Okay, there's no way I'm going to be able to find that tweet now, but it doesn't matter. I'm going to do my best with pronunciations. Just keep in mind I'm a moron, so I really do actually want to get to the game, so... Welcome to the tutorial of Imperiums Greek Wars. This tutorial will take you through the main features and controls of the game. We recommend you take the time to read the text thoroughly and not just blindly follow the instructions. It will take you 50 to 60 minutes to complete, but you can save the game and come back to it later if you need a break. Yeah, no worries, Algrins. If you have any questions, let me know and I'll try and catch you up. But we're actually just starting the game portion. I was trying to talk about sort of why I find some of this history interesting and some of the background, but we're actually starting the game proper now. So after the tutorial, you can continue this game or follow your own path. Tutorial. The tutorial panel will be displayed on the left-hand side of the screen throughout the whole tutorial. The little I button will help you recall the current assignment and get advice on how to complete the task. This button, the map with an arrow on it, will help you find the unit that should perform the current action or find the correct location where the action should be executed. The cross, this button will close the tutorial and all the hints about how to play the game. Once there is a new assignment, the buttons will help you complete. The buttons that will help you complete it will start flashing to make them easier, make it easier to find them. The red question mark in a box, this icon in the tutorial dialog box marks the current assignment. And your first task is simple. Click on the help button I. Great, now you know where to find help. Use it whenever you are not sure how to continue. The next task is also easy. Select one of your map items on the map by simply clicking on it. Press any key. Where's the any key? Now you know how to select a map item. Once selected, the map item is highlighted and detailed information about it is displayed in the unit menu in the lower right corner of the screen. If you want to deselect a map item, use a left click. The unit menu shows important information about the selected map item, its properties, or damage. The square icon in the left edge of the menu represents special attributes and skills this map item has, and the buttons at the bottom part of the screen show available actions. The helmet, to navigate more easily and switch between your active units, you can use this button in the upper part of the unit menu, which automatically switches from the current selected unit to the one awaiting orders. Now click on the helmet to switch the view to another active unit. Well done. Let's try to move some of your units. The unit that can be moved is highlighted, and the orange arrow suggests a new location for it. If you don't see the orange arrow on the map, you might need to zoom out a bit to see a larger portion of the map, or click this button, the map with the arrow on it, in the tutorial panel. The reset button orders the unit to move to this new location. This game also offers so-called default actions that make the selection of commands and moves faster. When a map item is selected and you hover the cursor over it, different default actions will be offered at the tip of the cursor depending on the selected map item and tile. Most of the time, move unit is selected by default. You can change the default action by holding the control key. Send some of your units to new positions. So just to be kind of clear, I see why they call it a map unit, because map item as opposed to units, because cities are not units, and clearly moving cities is a very difficult thing to do. But it does sometimes make it a little tricky to parse out what they're referring to. So essentially what I think this is saying here is that it's kind of context sensitive, that if you select a unit and you right click, its default behavior is going to be something different. But if you select like a city, you can still perform sort of default action. Well, maybe a city's not a good example, but you can click other things and it's going to, depending on the context, perform other actions, which is a really common behavior in all other games. That's what I'm taking away from this menu. All right. Military map items are foot and cavalry units as well as static buildings with a military purpose. They have a number of unique properties determined by their type. Some properties are constant, such as capacity, whereas others, such as attack strength, health, or action points, can change during the game. All information about the unit or its type can be found in the info windows when you right and left click on the unit model in the unit menu. Map highlight is explained in the Imperiums library by pressing F1. So this is the default action. So apparently we could also press G, but again, it's a default behavior. So I believe if I just right click, it should move the unit. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so now you can move units around the map. Let's try again, but this time we will take a free tile that doesn't belong to any state. You can claim any tile by simply stepping on it with any of your military units. However, should a defending unit be positioned on such a tile, you will have to render this... Sorry, let me just read that again. You can claim any tile by simply stepping on it with any of your military units. However, should a defending unit be positioned on such a tile, you will have to render this unit harmless, and only then you will be able to take the tile. Okay, so I think what that's saying is, if an enemy has got we'll just say an enemy's got a unit in position on the tile you want to take, rendering it harmless, I think, is allowing for the possibility that this game has options other than completely obliterating a unit in terms of conquest. But effectively, you need to deal with the defender before you're able to claim the slot, is what I'm taking from that lesson. You should also pay attention to the different terrains on the map as they affect the attack and defensibility of your units, their mobility and view range. Hills, for example, are good vantage points as they allow you to see a greater area. Claim the lands in the north for Macedonia. Keep expanding the borders of your lands. You will need a proper road network if you plan to build an empire worthy of that name, though. Roads play an important role in a country's development. Connecting cities, other buildings, and resources with roads improves the mobility of your units and the production of your resources. Roads and bridges can only be built by settlers. Give your settler an order to build a road by clicking the Build Road action button. So I'm assuming this is a priority here just because of the gold. So, and again, that's a default action, so I didn't actually need to move down to that menu. Now let's continue in the development of the empire and start utilizing and cultivating the land. All cities and most units need food to maintain their functions. Without food, your armies will rebel, cities will revolt, and people will leave to search for better livelihoods elsewhere. To increase food production, settlers should be ordered to build fields and farms around the cities to increase food yields. Keep in mind that only plains and grasslands are suitable for agriculture. Order a settler to build a field close to Therma by clicking on the Build Field action button. Now, I wonder if the tutorial is changing the default behaviors, or if it's because I'm in an ideal location for a field. So I also notice here, so I believe in this case it's going to cost me gold, just matching the images. Oops. I really don't like edge pan. I much prefer just using my arrows or my middle mouse button. Perfect. Settlers can now be put to good use cultivating wild lands. The first turn is almost over, but let's spend a bit more time on the game menu in the upper right corner of the screen. This button opens the main menu. This one displays the game help called Imperiums Library, where you find detailed information about rules, game mechanics, and features. The other buttons function as normal music player controls. Now it is time for the other players to make their moves. The big round button in the upper right corner of the screen ends the turn, and end the turn to take your time to watch the actions of the other players. My rivals are screaming. Well, I guess I can't look at the actions of the other players. I wonder if that's the same lackeys referred to in the dialogue. There's a Platonic dialogue called Lackeys, and I'm wondering if it's the same character. Alright, we have received some very unsettling news. This is not a good start. The Dardanian tribes are marching towards our northern border, and Athenian units have been sighted moving along the, Alikamanus River towards our city of Aigai. We have to adapt our tutorial to address this dangerous situation. We shall teach both the barbarians as well as the arrogant Athenians a lesson. Let's start in the south. Luckily, there is a unit stationed at Aigai that could be fortified within the city, which would greatly increase the city defenses. Use this button to order a unit to enter the city, and, well, that's all we need to do. Okay, hang on. So it's actually already positioned in there, so the action that we're taking... Okay, oh, good lord, there's been... Okay, lands of Macedonia have been captured, unit settler close to Pella is ready, Therma is ready, turn of Macedonia has started, and then there was some reference to happiness going down because of too many units. In any case, if we push H, we should be able to load the... Oop. Now, what to do about the Dardanian hordes moving towards our border? Their city of Lynkestis is the capital and the base from which they sent their warriors to harass and raid our lands. Move a unit closer to the city. The Dardanian patrols are scouting around the city, keeping guard. Our warriors are well suited for movement and warfare in forests and woodlands. Let's use this advantage. As mentioned elsewhere, different army and unit types are suited to different terrains, which affect their fighting ability and mobility. You can always find quick information about terrain affinity in the tooltip and in the map items tab of the Imperium's library. Send the advancing unit to take cover in the forest. Okay. So I'm curious if it... So yeah, we'd get a negative to the defensive bonus for staying in grass. I'm actually going to hit F1 just to see if I can find... So I guess these are warriors? Yeah, so not good in deserts, good in forests, not good in grass, very good on hills. So hills, swamps, woodlands, all desirable. One thing I might look at would be the fact... Oh, actually, yeah, so the attack is worse on grass than the defense. So attacking people in open fields would likely be a big problem for us. So as the tutorial recommends, we're going to move them into the woods for the terrain bonus. We sneak close to the city, and now is the time. Now is not the time for hesitation. We must not let the enemy seize momentum. Every assault lowers the defensive ability of the defender. Use this to your advantage and plan your attacks in waves, targeting the same unit with several of your own. Don't let them catch their breath. Use this button to launch an attack on an enemy map item. Move your unit and attack the enemy guards. Wait a minute. So why is the... Ah, okay, I get it here. Commander's advice, uncertain outcome, prediction accuracy, reliable assessment. -2 an attack bonus. Yeah, I mean, the game's recommending it, so... I suppose the one thing I would point out here is that it doesn't really feel like I am dealing with a... Like, so given that the game says, like, yeah, so move to the woodlands so you can take advantage, I'm like, well, I'm not entirely sure the equation has changed all that much for attacking this unit. But, I mean, again, I'm just following through on what it's telling me to do, so... All right, battle with the Dardanian Kingdom, close to Lynkestis. Macedonia, Philippomen's army, 500 soldiers, 2 to 11, minus 30% terrain affinity, plus 6 morale. 139 casualties, 2 unit experience. And then the Dardanian... So fewer action points, bonus for army morale, and readiness bonus. Our chances were slim, but we did what we could. Okay. Our cavalry unit didn't win any major victory for us. We lost the element of surprise. You can see the details of the battle in the battle result window that pops up after the fight. Here you can see what factors determine the outcome of the battle. Our cavalry unit lost quite a lot of men in this brawl, and it needs fresh men to replenish its ranks. The closest facility to do this is in Edessa. Move the unit to Edessa and then click the Heal Inside button to bring this unit back to full strength. There are several ways to heal a unit, and Heal Inside is the fastest. You have to bring the unit back to a city or facility where the particular unit type can be built, trained, and healed. Okay. It will take a few turns before the unit is ready for action again. Let's turn our action back to the battlefront. The enemy unit took some damage in the fight as well, and this could be our chance. Send a fresh unit against the enemy. Nope. Commander's advice, absolute supremacy, and the prediction is free from doubt. So I'm a little surprised, actually, that the difference is so large. So they outnumbered us, but considerably less strength and defense. Ah, because there had been multiple battles. And they got completely wiped out. Triumph, our soldiers fought like lions. Brilliant, our first victory. Fortune favors the bold. There is nothing more that we can do about the situation on our borders this turn, but there is still work to be done. If Macedonia is to become great, we need to invest in urban infrastructure. We can build a new city at the Axios River. River tiles. It's the name of a name of a decent publication. I think it's the Politico people who founded that. River tiles not only produce more resources, but there also happens to be the foundations of an abandoned town, which will make the construction much cheaper. Use the Build Town action button to order a unit to found a new settlement. Now this is interesting. So it says there's like the remains of a town here, but I'm curious how I would have known that had the game not told me. You are now a founder of cities. This is part of your legacy for future generations. The plains next to the new city should be plowed and fields created. River and sea tiles are very fertile, so it pays off to build new cities on riverbanks and along the coast. Build a field on the river tile. By building a new city, the Nomad unit was spent and cannot be used anymore, but you still need a workforce for other tasks. Most new units are recruited and training in cities and some other buildings like stables or shipyards, depending on the specialization of these facilities. New settlers can be built in Therma. See the specialization under the city name in the unit menu. Select a city and then use the build action to recruit a new unit. Okay, so it's talking about specialization in cities. What I'm maybe a little unclear about. So like I see an axe here. I see, I'm not sure if that's an axe or a hammer, but it looks different from the... So I'm maybe a little unclear in terms of this specialization that they're referring to. In any case, we definitely want to build a settler. So a settler is a non-military unit that can build cities, roads, and bridges, cultivate agricultural lands, and modify terrain's features. Great work. The new settler will be ready in a few turns. The road close to the capital city has been finished, and the settler is waiting for new orders. You can build a longer route instead of going through the tiles one by one, which is much easier. Click on the Build Road action button, and then select the tile where the road should lead to. The settler will then work independently until the road is finished. A road needs to be built to connect the nearby gold mine with a city. Connecting mines and cities is an important part of economic planning, as roads increase mine production. So that wasn't a particularly difficult one to do. Obviously, we've already built most of that road. Apart from actions taking place directly on the map, there are several important windows where you can steer the economic and political standing of the whole country. Let's take a look at the State window, which can be accessed by clicking the button with your coat of arms in the upper left corner of the screen. The State window contains a number of administrative tools which help you rule and control the country. We will come back to some of them later, but let's explain the birth rate support now. You can control the birth rate in your cities by financing the building of new houses and providing material help. The more you invest in the birth rate grants, the higher population increase you can expect. If Macedonia is to thrive, we need to grow our populace. Increase the birth rate support by moving the slider. All right. So I don't know. State subsidies for producing erotica. Is this basically how we're doing it? Well, I guess the people are doing it, but this generous gesture will surely please the population, and our nation will. Yeah, I bet the population's pleased. Unfortunately, such support is paid from state coffers, and there is never enough gold to support all of our plans. Let's try to make a deal with Chokidike. Perhaps we can barter gold for our surplus food. Long-standing trade deals forge trust between states, which is just another benefit that we can gain from this partnership. By the way, this went all the way to 100, so I don't know if it had intended for me to do that, or if it just kind of, if I just got impatient and moved too far. Yeah. Government-sponsored pornography is something we should bring back. Long-standing trade deals forge trust between states, which is just another benefit that we can gain from this partnership. Close the currently open window by clicking the X button in the top right corner. Then click on the Trade Overview button in the map menu in the lower left corner and set the conditions for this exchange. Click on the resources and set the amounts to 3 on both sides. I should take a minute to read that. Hello, Vanguard Master. How you doing? How's your Kickstarter? I was meaning to end the exception. Thank you very much for the subscription. 52 months. You're making me feel old. I noticed that you had got some backers by the end of the broadcast, but I didn't actually check in on it before this broadcast, which I was meaning to. I hope it's going well, because I mean, like we said in our chat afterwards, I know it's a long run, so it's a maybe you just want to come here to relax for a little bit and not talk about that stuff, but. I did want to take a minute. For those of you who don't know, actually, if you want to put the link in chat, you can. Vanguard Master. Vanguard Master is somebody who is also a Canadian. Well, not also, who is a Canadian game developer. Currently has a Kickstarter going for a sort of fantasy city. Sorry, I shouldn't say city builder. Kind of a crafting survival RPG, and I believe it's close to the start, so I think there's probably about 28-ish days or so to go on it. But I also owe you a Happy Canada Day as well. Going slow, but it has to be expected as it's the long weekend. Managed to get some feedback from people and change the Kickstarter a bit to flow better. Oh, that's excellent. Great. 25 days. Okay. But yeah, please feel free to drop that link inside of chat, and definitely people can check it out. And hopefully give you support as well as feedback. So it's two important halves to the equation. All right, so let me try that again. This generous gesture will surely please the population, and our nation will grow. Unfortunately, such support is paid from state coffers, and there is never enough gold to support all our plans. Let's try to make a deal with Chokidike. Perhaps we can barter gold for our surplus food. To you as well, the accept. Happy Canada Day to all of you, even if you are for those who are not Canadians. The long-standing trade deals forge trust between states, which is just another benefit that we can gain from this partnership. Close the currently open window by closing the X button in the top right corner, then click on the Trade Overview button on the map menu in the lower left corner to set the conditions for this exchange. Click on the resources and set the amounts to 3 on both sides. Cool. Thank you for sharing the link, Vanguard. I was mentioning that this game, for some reason, doesn't let me select just the one window. I have to basically play this on full screen, and so again, like I don't want my super secret, spy stuff to be shown. I was can't blow my cover. But yeah, no, it's just one of these ones where if I'm doing my if I'm doing searches in the middle of the stream, actually, okay, I don't do this. I will admit, okay, so number one, if you're here, you're not this person. This is somebody from years ago who does not see the broadcast. So I am not above this, although I do it very, very rarely. But when there is someone who's being particularly obnoxious, sometimes a streamer just needs to let like just vent for a bit. And they will sometimes message someone else. Little do you know, you are actually this mysterious Count of Monte Cristo. But here's a good. If I ever have to do a code name, I'd go for Stocky Mex. Because it's an anagram of System Chalk, but it also fits for it's Stocky Mech, not Stocky Mex. It also fits for Phantom Brigade. What was I going to say? Yeah. So, it's been a while since I've had to do that, but there've definitely been a couple of times where like I just need to kind of like privately message someone. Right, obnoxious people, my favorite topic. So in any case, I do have someone who's an absolute sweetheart. So I don't know how many of you remember Kaylee Cakes. But apparently what she did, so I think if I do Shift F1, that opens. Yeah. So that opens my window. So like if I were to go and write like... So, like, I might think that this is something that is private to me, right? Because most of the time when you're in a focused mode, it's not. But clearly, depending on what you write on these, you might be letting people know... Might be letting people into a little bit more than they need. And this is exactly what they did. Maybe I shouldn't be mentioning that was Kaylee Cakes who did this, but this is like years ago, and I don't think Kaylee's been streaming for a while. But yeah, so there was someone who was being maybe a little over familiar in chat and was maybe starting to get on her nerves. And apparently she'd specifically mentioned them, and they let her know they were really not happy with what she said about them. So, again, like I realize like letting people know the behind. I think everybody kind of secretly knows that this is what's going on. So again, just to be clear, that's not any of you that I'm referring to. I'll let you know if you're bugging me. I'm trying to remember why I said that. Oh yeah. So it's just one of these things where like it's nice. So I think for the most part, even if I do tend to go on a lot of digressions, I'm generally aware of things being on, right? That there is a live broadcast going, there's a hot mic, keep that in mind before saying something that maybe you would not want the world to hear. Oh, thank you, Vanguard Master. This one was particularly egregious. This one had about an hour before we got into the game, but I think for like 20 minutes of it was a little bit of setup, just kind of explaining why there would be some interruptions. But, still 40 minutes of talking about stuff that's not in the game, I realize is going to be off-putting for some people. And thank you, Algrins. Yeah, I mean, I have heard from some people that they actually don't like the fact that I talk the whole time, that they think it would be nice if I had breaks in between. But the thing is that I very rarely actually force the speech. Generally, like if you have the misery of meeting me in person, you will know that I do actually have a tendency to jump from topic to topic quite rapidly. Because to me, they're all connected, right? They make perfect logical sense, but perhaps... only to me. It's like the way I've got all my books around here. I can find the books that I need, but I don't think any sane person would be able to discern some kind of an organizing principle. But yeah, anyways. So needless to say, like the reason why I went on this digression about chat messages and all of that is that for me, as a practice of good streamer hygiene, I prefer to play games in a focused windowed mode because on the odd chance that I say something intemperate or I write something intemperate or I need to vent or there's also been some times where someone will like send me a Discord message and it winds up being something quite personal. I don't want that to be out in the world, right? And you never know. Like, nobody goes out of their way saying is like, yeah, I'm gonna fall asleep on stream today. That's, nobody does that. But it happens. And so, whenever I do something like this, I kind of feel like I'm taking my life in my own hands in terms of doing full screen. So anyways, you do the same, except that you're less coherent than you when you do it. And I forget why I went off on my tangent. Well, I forget why I went off on my tangent. It's like Inception. There's like 4 or 5 layers to the tangents. But usually, I eventually, given enough time, I'll find my way back. But we were going to be doing a trade agreement with Chuck Idike. So let's try that now. But I'm going to take. Oh, interesting. So it pushed my birth rate support to 33. So my interpretation of that is, yes, I shouldn't necessarily have gone to 100%, but the game is going to reset it anyway. So I'm not sure why 33 is the best option, but oh yeah, window and game caption are your best friends. And when a third-party plugin disabled your ability to use them for a bit, I only captured a portion of your screen so you could have hidden things to the side. I got a guess for yours too. I don't know if you have like moderators in what you do, but I've got to assume that there's probably a lot of shop talk off to the side for your broadcast. I mean, again, like I make far more assumptions that I know of the format, but I suspect that there's probably I'm pretty sure that there's like if there's common people inside of a community that may or may not be a positive influence, let's say, I suspect that information is disseminated fairly rapidly. Okay, let's close it down and get the trade up. Trade loss 2, risk of robbery. Okay. So they said set it to 3 on everything. Wait, 3 on each side? Ah! So I'm just going to set this to 2 to see if the game... Okay, interesting. Tutorial currently active, and this is not the current assignment. So I just want to take a minute here to make sure that I don't have anything else to trade. Yeah. So if I try to go for 4... Okay, they would let me do that. But yeah, they said 3 on each side, so... Very good. Our merchants are on their way to Chalkidike with our proposal. Let's finish this turn. We should know if Chalkidike accepts this proposal soon enough. On to the next turn. I really do like this window and game capture are your best friends. Oh, sorry, you said that before. Sneaky. Which thing was I sneaking on? This is not like, I feel like a bit of a clown talking about this, but like there's the portrait of Philip with his missing eye. I believe Philip lost that eye during the wars that we're setting up for, which is actually something that... Oh, sneaking stuff off to the side of the couch. Sorry, Elgrins, I'm at sleep. What was I going to say? But yeah, so this is actually something that Old World does. So apparently you can actually have Philip keep his eye, apparently. But oh, there's the fight. We'll see how it turned out. But yeah, so in this case here, I think there's a slight. No, I mean, again, like I'm not gonna rip into an indie game where it's like, oh my god, can you believe that they didn't, that Philip's missing his eye at the start of the campaign? What the hell were they thinking? Like, no, but it's just gonna highlight. I think this portrait of Philip is a future Philip. All right. I hope never to be in those Discord servers, Decree. Okay, so they've accepted the trade offer, and before we start the new... Okay, so Laki's army has attacked Alcandros' army in Agai. Dindar's army has attacked Antander's army close to Lynkestis. Lands of Macedonia have been captured, and Chalkidike and Macedonia have signed trade. Before we start a new turn, let's quickly summarize where to get information about the current turn and the latest events. You might have noticed that the date in the upper right corner has changed. You can find additional info about the current turn, playtime, and game details in the tooltip. Every new turn starts with a presentation of the latest events displayed at the left edge of the screen. You can click on the reports and move the map to the location where the event took place. If you want to recall the panel anytime during your turn, you just click on the flag in the map menu. Okay, that's really nice that they include that, because obviously I've missed some of the notifications because I've been talking too long. And now we are ready for the next challenge. There is both good and bad news. The good news is that our merchants were able to sign a trade deal with Chalkidike, and the exchange will start very soon. The bad news is that both the Dardanians and the Athenians attacked us again, but luckily their units were not able to inflict too much damage. Athens has attacked the city of Agai, but the defenders of the city were able to repel them. We need time to regroup and to send some reinforcements to Agai, but even that may not be enough. We need to ask for peace, at least temporarily. This can be done in the diplomacy window through which you steer your foreign affairs. Propose peace to Athens. Dear Athens, please stop attacking my cities. Love, Philip. Yeah, so, I mean, this is kind of interesting. I'll be interested to see how this turns out, because, like, when I take a look at this, low attitude, I suppose their army morale is a little low, but it seems like their population, economy, power, like, everything is just massive compared to us, so I would suspect for myself, it's like, well, why, like, if I was playing Athens, it'd be like, why would I sign a peace with you? I'm totally able to crush you. Our envoys are on the way to Athens, and we can now turn our attention to the conflict with the Dardanians. We have a good position, a stone's throw away from the Dardanian capital, and we should hold it as long as possible. In such a situation, it's best to order the unit to fortify its position, which significantly increases its defenses. The warrior unit damaged in the attack is in a tricky situation, and it would be better to pull it back outside of the enemy's striking distance. Fortify the unit in the forest, and move the damaged unit back from the battlefront. Okay, so I think this is the damaged unit, and this is the one that I need to fortify. So F for fortify. Now, this intrigues me that they say moving one back like this is going to be enough. So I guess that implies that there's a zone of control system. The signed trade deal with Chalkidike helps maintain good neighborly relations. However, even better for forging strong and lasting partnerships are bilateral treaties that bind both sides to mutual collaboration. Diplomacy requires delicate negotiations. Don't ask for too much, too fast. Good relations are cemented by gestures of goodwill, and time is needed to build trust between states. Chalkidike is our good partner, and so let's move our relations to a new level by signing new treaties. The map item info treaty allows for exchange of information about our units and map items, while peaceful passage allows for the non-military units to travel across our border. Open the diplomacy window with Chalkidike and tick the 2 highlighted boxes. I mean, let's be real here. We're playing Philip II. Isn't the way we really cement relations is to take another wife? I mean, surely this is the reason one plays these games, right? Philip II dating sim. I have altered the deal. Pray I don't alter it any further. Excellent. Hopefully the envoys will return with a positive reply. In the meantime, we should keep rebuilding our beautiful country. The new city is finally finished. Cities and some other facilities can be improved by various economic, military, cultural, or social improvements. Considering that the new city is close to a border and we don't have any reliable information about the regions further north, it might be wise to improve the city defenses. Click on the Build Improvement button and select the improvement that you want to build. Build a defense improvement in the city. Okay. Okay, so map item view range is increased, costs in 3 turns, and then map item receives a defensive bonus. Okay. Defense kind of almost seems like a very generic kind of name for something, but I actually think it's slightly better to do than have like 50 different defensive units, which you may or may not be able to keep in mind. So you can also improve units in a similar way. You can give them better training, armaments, or weapons to enhance their fighting abilities, mobility, and other attributes. Our unit in the city of Pella has no special training. We could enhance its mobility, Pathfinder, to make regrouping faster, and then it should be sent to join the fight against the Athenian colonies. Click on the Train action button and select your preferred improvement from that list. Alright. So it's not going to... I'm not going to be able to do Assault. It's quite determined for me to do Pathfinder, which I'm actually okay with. The unit is undergoing training now and should be ready for action by the next turn. As you already know, settlers can build roads and cultivate land, but they can do more than that. They can utilize land such as swamps by draining them and transforming them into fertile lands. Hey, we're the Dutch! Hey, Whiskey, how you doing? Oh, Canada, happy Canadian Independence Day, my man. So fun fact, my birthday is July 15th, which was the original proposal for Canada Day. Sir John A. Macdonald did not think that the preparations would be done in time for July the 1st. So I almost shared the same birthday as Canada, but in this case I just share the same birth month. I did have a very small wish to try Civilization 6 because, of course, Canada is now part of Civilization 6, and there is a truly stirring rendition of the Canadian national anthem in the update. But I mean, obviously, I really wanted to play Imperiums Greek Wars, and I'm intrigued. Like, obviously, we're still going through the tutorial, and I'll probably be doing the tutorial for the rest of the broadcast. But I'm very intrigued by where this is going. So, yeah, Civ is a beautiful game. Sorry, I really needed to drink a lot today. And not just because it's Canada Day. Water. It's just been hot. The unit is undergoing training now and should be ready for action for the next turn. As you already know... I was going to call myself the Dutch Macedonians. As you already know, settlers can build roads and cultivate land, but they can do more than that. They can utilize land such as swamps by draining them and transforming them into fertile lands. Use the Drain Terrain action button to give the necessary command. You can drain only swamps. What, you can't drain the desert? That's it. I'm refunding this. Took you a while to get used to how they did the district spread out instead of in Civ 5, having them all in the city center, but once you understand how it worked, there's no going back. Yeah, actually, this has been true for Civilization for quite a while, that on the release of the new Civilization entry, everybody talks about how the game has gone in the wrong direction and how the old one is better. And if you take a look at the kind of concurrent players on the previous game, it is actually quite often the case that the old game will sometimes surpass the new game in terms of the number of players. It's also true that at least by the time of the first expansion, that consensus has changed, and that the newest one is the most widely played. And it's interesting for those of you who do like 4X games, and for those of you who are particularly like Civ, Sid Meier actually does have a book out now, Sid Meier's memoir. And he does actually talk about this. So I had, there's a YouTube comment that came in, and I tried my best to be nice. I actually really did not like what the person had to say. but because like basically it was something that came up in Terra Invicta, and it was like a throwaway comment, but they really wanted to latch on to like a throwaway comment that I made, and I think it kind of involved sort of straw manning a position, which is not necessarily one I agree with in terms of civilization, but I think at the very least, like, should be acknowledged for the point on principle that they're making, as opposed to just sort of like pretending that they're unreasonable. Again, it's like the difference between if you're just going to characterize someone as believing something that they don't, what's the point in having the argument, right? Like the only person you're really satisfying is yourself, and at that point you don't need to write a comment. You can just quietly think to yourself, whatever you want. But on the other hand, like I was going to try and say, it's like, okay, well, I can kind of get why you're mad about it. Like I don't like it when people talk this way about a favorite game too, but here's another way to think about this. And I actually had cause to bring up the this passage from Sid Meier's memoir, where he talks about some of the academic criticism of civilization, and sort of kind of points out where it didn't really seem to be fair, or that maybe some of the people coming up with the writing had a bit too much time on their hands. Like, because apparently some of this stuff was going all the way back to his Bach game, where there's like some seedy underbelly being discovered through that. So it's kind of like, yeah, okay. I mean, and like the thing to keep in mind too is like Sid Meier is absolutely a sweet old man. Like he plays the organ in his church, kind of like nice guy. Like, Sid Meier, so far as I can tell, is just an absolute sweetheart from any indication I've ever gotten. I mean, I suppose there is one question why there was like a sudden raft of departures from Firaxis. I'd love to know the story behind that. And given the fact that everyone who would have been involved in that has actually been interviewed on designer notes, and all that has been mentioned is that there were these separations from Firaxis, I sort of feel that there has just been this omerta, and like nobody's actually going to talk about the reasons, which is a shame, because I'd sort of like to know like what, I mean, it's unpleasant to talk about, but it's actually important to understand what causes these clusters of talent to break apart. But one of the details that's really interesting about Sid Meier's memoir is that he actually talks about the fact that the Civilization series has never had the same lead designer each time. So I think he was the lead on the first Civilization, and then I believe Brian Reynolds was. So I think the closest that Civ has ever come to having sort of the same designer twice is I believe Brian Reynolds was the lead on Civ 2, but Brian Reynolds was also the lead on Alpha Centauri. I can't remember who was the lead on 3. I know Soren Johnson did wind up taking on a more senior role by the end, but I don't know if he definitely didn't start as the lead. Actually, this is why the internet exists. Who is the designer on Civ 3? Soren Johnson, go to hell. Oh, apparently it does. He was elevated to designer, at least according to. So Jeff Briggs is listed here. But yeah, Soren Johnson famously for number 4. I know there's a lot of people who say that 4 is still the best in the entry. John Schaefer went on to 5. John Schaefer's released his game at the Gates, or it's actually specifically John Schaefer's at the Gates. To which you have to say, well, somebody better let him in then, right? But he also had started a project at Paradox, but it didn't actually turn out. So I believe he's still working on his current project at the Gates. And then I think it's Ed Beach. I wanted to say Ed Wood, but that's a different creator. anyways, it's a tabletop designer that wound up doing Civ 6. So Ed Beach is probably best known for a book about, it's called Here I Stand, by GMT Games. I think that was kind of his claim to fame before he moved on to Civ 6. And then I'm sure Civ 7 is already kind of underway at Firaxis. But yeah, for those of you that haven't read it, Sid Meier's memoir is a really good read. And he does actually specifically talk about how there's always been a different designer in the series, and it's kind of kept it fresh. But I think one of the consequences of that is that very often you will hear for sort of the first year of release how Civ is going in the wrong direction and that people will never play the new one. But obviously Civ 6 is one. I mean, essentially the choice about cities in Civ 6 was the same as the one that they made in Civ 5. Like, everyone was convinced that unstacking units in Civ 5 would be the death of the series. And now you can't imagine having stacked units again. And likewise for Civ 6, it's like, oh, districts are too complicated. I don't know what's going on. And now it's like, oh no, yeah, I get that's how this works. And if they were to get rid of it in 7, you'd probably feel kind of weird. Okay, we're gonna drain the swamp, as Algrin says. Oh yeah, sorry, I was talking about a YouTube comment. So like, what I tried to do was I kind of tried to point out how Sid Meier had pointed out how the criticism was helpful in making the games better when they did point out things that were oversights. But the problem is that like the reply that came afterwards, like, kind of just seemed to make the same point that I felt like I'd addressed in my comment. And at that point I was kind of like, okay, I feel a little bad that I spent the time writing the comment that I did, because I just don't think that there's going to be any transfer of information. Like, it just kind of seems to be that, this point of view, which I don't necessarily agree with, is just going to be caricatured, and I don't really feel like I need to be participating for that person to make that that comment. You really like the way the envoys worked in the console one, Revolution, but you don't think it's the best or anything. The only Revolution one that I played was on a DS, which I think is a lot like the original Civilization from the screenshots that I've seen of the original Civilization. But yeah, I mean, they're all different, and honestly, like, it's what I like. So like, what I like about Old World, what I like, again, I haven't gotten all the way through the tutorial of this, but what I kind of like about Imperium's Greek Wars, and a couple, at least the 4Xs that stand out for me, is that they have something new to bring in. And sometimes there'll be some things that feel inelegant, or sometimes they're going to be, hard to understand, and maybe they're not going to be your favorite choices, but essentially they're willing to try something new. And I tend to think that's really the like, it seems so basic, right? Like, obviously you want to offer people something new, but like, especially when you have a really successful model, it's hard to break out of it. And it's one of the things that I think Old World does so successfully, is that it's actually able to think a bit about its inheritance and how it moves forward. Clearly in this, right, there's a lot more resources than you're going to be working with in Civilization. And then, of course, just the idea in terms of like the overall map and how the territory is working and such. This is very different from what you would traditionally think in terms of a 4X style game. And ultimately, what's going to sort of indicate in terms of how much I get out of this game is probably going to be like, okay, so there's a higher level of complexity. How does that translate into me sort of enjoying this fantasy of an underreported part of history? Well, at least in terms of game. Obviously in history, this has been, this is fine. This is, if you want to find a book on this period of time, you can get it. It's just that I don't think people tend to talk about this as much as other parts. In this case here, what I'm probably eventually going to do is just starting to see how this additional complexity allows me to do some of the things that either happened in history, or to, bring a new perspective in terms of, I guess one thing that would be kind of interesting is that when you look at a game like this and at its mechanics, in a really indirect way, games can sometimes be a bit of a comment in terms of how it happened, like what worked. Sometimes you'll play a grand strategy game like Hearts of Iron 4, and Hearts of Iron 4 is going to have a historical mode, which basically just weights the probabilities of certain events. I believe actually in EU4, another Paradox game, it will give a bonus in combat against for factions that traditionally won. It actually gives a bonus so that history sort of plays out. Yeah, we talked about this at the start, Vanguard Master. I kind of compared it to the 7 Years' War, which is an incredibly important and interesting historical event, but it also sort of lives in the shadow of the American and French revolutions. So, with that in mind, it's one of these things that is actually kind of very important, but if it gets discussed at all, it kind of gets indicated as sort of like a foundation or precursor to the quote-unquote more important events. And I mean, it's not even it's not necessarily an incorrect characterization. But I think one of the really smart things about this particular choice for this game is that the fact that it's interesting and isn't widely covered should actually mean that it's a really suitable choice for a game. But in any case, what I'm trying to say here with the mechanic, right? So if you go down that paradox route, you're sort of just forcing it. So you almost have this idea that it was the destiny of this unit to succeed. Whereas for other games, what you can do is the game will have a certain set of rules. It'll have a certain set of conditions at the start of the game that will mean that, history plays out, usually in line with sort of usually when you're playing a historical game, the rules are built in such a way that history does sort of play out. In fact, on tabletop wargaming, there are some war games where the side that was defeated historically is not actually expected to win. That success is more about outperforming what the the historical group had done. And so, in this case here, once we sort of scratch under the surface and we spend some more time in terms of Imperiums, Greek Wars, one of the things that's going to be kind of interesting is to see, what is the most successful path Macedonia can take to become sort of the big power, right? So is there a diplomatic system rich enough to allow you to sort of engage in a bunch of strategic marriages? Or is the military system developed in such a way that you're able to sort of realize the reforms that Philip brought into the army? Is there something about the state of your your rivals that are leading it to they're leading it to be for you to have a unique advantage? These aren't necessarily historical documents. They're not necessarily trying to argue for a particular perspective on history, I don't think. But it is kind of interesting, at least for well-designed games, to be able to just see how those mechanics sort of communicate a particular understanding of the events. I personally find that very interesting, especially when you start kind of twisting the knobs a little bit and seeing if you can do things a bit differently. Speaking of war games, have you ever played Command Modern Air Naval Operations? Yes, I have, although I believe its title is now just Command. But I have it and most of its DLC. It is a very, very complicated game, and I would probably not say that I fully understand it yet, but it's another, alongside Shadow Empires, it's another one which I'd actually really like to find some time to play, because, or not just play, but to be able to fully read the manual and get a better understanding on it. Because Command is absolutely a game that taught me stuff. I know a lot more about how submarines work having played Command, and there's definitely not a lot The game is now Command. The previous game, Command Modern Operations, is no longer available to purchase. So I have a copy of Command Modern Air Naval Operations in my Steam library as well. But anybody who wants to get Command now has to get the updated product Command. And I believe you would get a discount for purchasing Command now, but it's effectively Command has now replaced the old product. So you have to pay to upgrade if you want it, but the game you are referring to is now called Command. If you look it up, you would not be able to find Air Naval Operations anymore. It's fundamentally, though, it's basically the same game. There's improvements that they've made because I believe the way that the database worked, there had to be 2 separate files. I don't know if that's true for the updated one anymore, but anyways, converting such difficult terrain takes several turns. We should also not forget our new city. It needs to be connected to our road network in case we need to quickly move our units there. Is this right? I feel like I should properly be connecting it to the... we'll see. Before we end the turn, we should come back to the state window, this time to decide on the direction of our research. Cities consume a lot of resources, so reducing their maintenance cost is our priority now. Research options are displayed in the invention tree, accessible through the research window in the state window. Available technologies are marked by this icon. Okay, coinage available in 8 turns. Trading makes a city makes more money than it consumes by increasing its production. Now we can catch a breath and decide on our next actions while watching the moves of our opponents. I'm always a little weirded out when they kind of go in some of these circles, but it may be that they're trying to get vision on certain areas. So if the Athenians move back, I guess that means that they accepted the peace treaty? Envoy succeeded. Treaty changes with Chalkidike were agreed. A peace offer was rejected by the Athenians. All right. Before we busy ourselves with the latest news that require our attention, let's take a look at the panel in the top left corner called the State menu. The banner button with the coat of arms opens the state window. Probably banner is not the right word for that. Opens the state window with main administrative tools to manage your country. The resource panel shows the current reserves as well as surplus or loss from the previous turns. Click on any of the resources to open the resource usage window with detailed information about the selected resource. Below the resource panel are 3 important buttons. Build facility lists buildings that can be constructed outside of cities. We will come back to this function later. State decisions are actions designed to help in the time of crisis or when needed. And the objectives map shows objectives and their goals displayed on the map. Research progress bar shows how far you are in acquiring a particular technology. News from within as well as from outside our country is in a similar tone as the last messages. Chalkidike signed the 2 new treaties we proposed, which is great news indeed. On the other hand, Athens rejects any peace talks, although they withdrew their unit from Aigai after an unsuccessful attack. Let's try a different strategy then. Chalkidike seems to be open to our requests. If we could make them declare war on Athens, it might make negotiations with Athens easier. Chalkidike is a trading power with a very good reputation among the Greek states, unlike Macedonia, which is perceived as semi-barbaric by most Hellenes. You can ask another state to declare war against a third party in the diplomacy window. Similarly, you can also ask another state to sign a peace with a third party, which can strengthen your world standing as an initiator of peace. Demand. All right. Let's see if we manage to shake the balance of power. We could move the restored cavalry unit from Edessa as well as a newly trained unit from Pella to the south. Okay, in this case it actually looks like the game is... Am I missing something here? Oh, interesting. I thought that the horse unit might be used elsewhere. We already touched briefly on state decisions. In general, these are important decisions that can have a profound effect on one or more areas of state management. The upfront cost to employ such a strategy can be calculated, but their impact cannot be fully determined in advance. Some of these strategies are often conditioned to fit certain situations, which means that they only become available when you use them to your benefit or when a situation might require it. Taking such decisions might help bridge or even avert moments of crisis. Military campaigns should be accomplished by a general who can incite unrest in foreign cities and perhaps lead to their surrender, as well as encourage the troops. Right now we have no such figure in our ranks, but we can hire an esteemed general into our service. Here, one of the state decisions, called Hire a General, comes in handy. What are you waiting for? An outstanding military person can pour new energy into the armed forces when it is needed. If no such person grows naturally out of the military ranks, a new hero must be found. Even one man can turn the tide. One victory is often what tips the scales in your favor. We managed to hire a new general. A lot of hope and expectations weigh on this man's shoulders. General Orestes, close to Pella, joined our ranks. Resource yields suffered from the latest changes. Now, that interests me. So if it says yields, like 5 seems to be a fairly large amount to give up per turn. Excellent. It seems that we found a man who has the respect of our troops. Let's test him right away, send him to join our forces in the south, and try to encourage our soldiers there. Generals can increase general morale of nearby troops through the Encourage action button. Take care that no enemy gets too close to your general. Losing such a respected military figure can demoralize your units and threaten all your plans. Encourage troops by using a general. Alright, so... Do I have to shout Elaleleu again? It seems that our men listened to him, so let's not waste time. The unit inside of Aigai can now safely leave the city, follow the Athenian troops, and reclaim the lands taken by them in previous turns for Macedonia. Claim back the lands taken by Athens and launch an attack on Macedonia. So it says here that the commander's advice is not available, so I'm going to assume that this is not going to turn out well for me, but... Okay, it's a draw. Our chances were slim, but we did what we could. So just taking a look at the numbers. I mean, I'm certainly not going to complain about being able to follow up with some stronger units on this. Victory! Our soldiers fought like lions. 186 casualties. I'm intrigued here about the the reduction in overall morale. I'm curious what caused that. But obviously, so like it seems to me that the doing more than one battle option here is a really, really strong. I suspect that the majority of the strategy of this game is built around applying this more battles penalty. So essentially putting maybe some weaker units that you don't necessarily want them to have like very high casualties, but basically kind of put a roughly equivalent unit in first to soften up the enemy unit, and then follow up with your heavy hitters to wipe out the enemy. Well done, another victory over Athens. This will teach them a lesson about Macedonia. The defenders of Macedonia were destroyed. The city is too far from Attica for Athens to be able to send reinforcements fast enough. This could be our chance to push them from our southern border for good, but we need to wait until next turn to deliver the final blow. For now, we should turn our eye back upon the troubles in the north. Because we only have one eye. There hasn't been any enemy movements reported recently, but our warrior unit, fortified near the enemy capital, needs to rest and replenish its ranks. Self-healing is a way of restoring the unit's strength without any costs, whenever and wherever it is needed. However, it takes quite a long time to heal the unit completely, and the unit is very vulnerable in the meantime. We had better move another group of warriors to their position for extra protection. Group the units on the same tile and let the fortified unit catch a breath and tend to their wounded. It's a 50% cost when you're healing up. So that is actually that's a very large penalty. Apart from improving cities, you can also build various facilities outside of cities. Blacksmith stable, defensive walls, and temple. All these buildings have their own function, so you should carefully select a location for them to maximize their effect. All available facilities are listed in the build facility list in the state menu. Let's build a temple on the hill above the capital city. Temples in general increase the birth rate in all nearby cities as they bring blessing and the protection of the gods. I have a feeling Vanguard Master will probably know this, but I am a little curious. So this did come up in the Old World stream, but how many people in chat... Actually, this is a two-parter question. Number one... who knows what the Sacred Band of Thebes was? And number two, how many Simpsons fans are there in the channel? So I feel like the Sacred Bands, because I don't really like focusing on this sort of stuff, because it's like there's just so much interesting history and there's so much fun stuff that you can do that you don't necessarily need to fixate on the people who like spoil it for everyone. This is great, yeah. So if you don't know about the Sacred Band of Thebes, totally look this up. But like, there's an unfortunate reality that there is something of a tendency for some really nasty people to be a little too into the classical world. And like, this becomes a bit of a problem because there'll be stuff like, Hellenic memes for classical teens or something like that has kind of talked about this, how like every once in a while you're going to have people who are maybe just a little too obsessed with certain aspects about the Roman Empire, like kind of coming in and filling it with a lot of like really nasty politics. But there, to me, I kind of feel like the ancient world also provides its own antidote to it, because I feel like the Sacred Band of Thebes is kind of like the steel mill that Homer brings Bart to in a certain Simpsons episode. Where it's like, if somebody maybe just gets a little too Western chauvinist in their attitude, or maybe is a little too, basically if they're just showing themselves to be a bit of a jerk, you just start talking about the Sacred Band of Thebes, and all of a sudden they run away. Yeah, so Vanguard Master knows what I'm talking about. Yeah, so the other this is the tough, like, you need to find that Venn diagram of people who like old Simpsons episodes and classical classic Greece. But I still insist that it's actually not a bad analogy. And one of the things I really like, I can't remember who it was in chat, but somebody actually pointed out that they really liked how in Old World it referred to the Sacred Band of Thebes, and like it was a nice little moment of representation in a genre where you don't necessarily see that. So my apologies for forgetting the name immediately. It's mostly I just don't want to say the wrong name and sort of not give proper credit. But that's something I really like, just because, again, you know, I am much more interested in games that have lots of hooks and have lots of ways of giving people access to really interesting bits of history. Hot analogies coming through. Hey, good Quam. But yeah, no, I mean, for those of you who don't know, like, again, this is just a wild and interesting history. And actually, if you've ever read, I think it's Plato's Symposium, I don't believe it's directly referenced, but they're almost certainly talking about it. But basically, the Sacred Band of Thebes was an army that was composed entirely of lovers. So, you know, the men are paired off as lovers, and sort of the argument for it essentially was that they'd fight harder, they would be much more successful troops because, of course, they are, you know, they're really taking care of someone that they, or like somebody they really, really care about, right? I can see that this conversation, I'm going to have to watch my terms. I'm going to have to watch my terms a lot more carefully. Yes, they fought the hardest, the longest battles. Their spear work was fantastic. We can keep going on this if you want. But there is actually a connection to Philip here, because he was actually held as a hostage for a while. He lived in Thebes. This is a tough one to talk about. So in Greece, there was so like the term I want to use is one that I think is gonna like flag the video in YouTube in like the really wrong way. So I'm going to use the other terminology, but there's there's basically the Erastes and the Euronymos. So the Erastes is kind of the older and active partner in a homosexual relationship, and the Euronymos, who is the younger partner. And in this case, this is sort of a relationship in which there's going to be sort of the transmission of knowledge, and, you know, it's kind of, you know, I suppose in the United States, you know, you become a man by getting your driver's license, and in ancient Greece, you become a man by engaging in one of these relationships. So in the case of Philip, he was the Euronymos of someone who, I'm fairly certain that was the relationship. Anyways, there was sort of an advocate of the Sacred Band of Thebes. So I don't believe Philip was involved in them, but it did actually kind of meet its final defeat at his hand in, I think it's like 20-ish years after it's like we're in 358, so 20 years might be too long. But anyways, the Sacred Band of Thebes, so there's two connections, which is number one, Philip had a relationship with sort of major advocates of this group, and in this case also that group ultimately would meet their defeat at his hand. Well, probably the hand of his soldiers, but still. apart from improving cities, you can build various and I'll leave you to look up the Erastes Hieronymus relationship, because I think that's also like one of the things that I find is a really big advantage. This is something my classics professor told me. One of the things that is interesting about classics is that it involves getting outside of sort of your conception of the world and sort of building the understanding of a society with very different ideas and priorities. And I think there's a value in that empathy. Now, the challenge here, right, is that the Greeks also practiced slavery, and obviously the concept of owning another human being is an absolutely appalling idea. And regardless of whether or not, the institution of slavery is different from maybe what we have in mind from other historical examples, like, it's still terrible, right? And it is not something that we should want. But, likewise, you don't necessarily want to, like, essentially what you want to do is that there's a perspective where you can say, it's like, okay, so essentially everyone up to the period in which we've now kind of widely accept that this is appalling and shouldn't happen. That effectively everyone up to that point is disqualified. We should not consider their thoughts and their priorities. Obviously, that's not very helpful in terms of understanding where we are, and particularly because this very often deals with the sort of, a lot of the time we're dealing with sort of this inheritance where we're dealing with sort of a world that has been shaped by some of these ideas. It's often very helpful to sort of understand maybe where some of these ideas have their origins. I also just generally think, first of all, I find this stuff terribly interesting. But on top of that, there is certainly a very good track record in terms of periods of time where people have read about the ancient world and have been inspired by it, and have later gone on to do some very great things. There really does seem to be something about wrestling with these works and, understanding them and sort of making it your own, sort of earning your inheritance, I suppose. This is a term that Schopenhauer uses in the essay How to Think for Oneself, but he's quoting Goethe from Faust. Sorry, it's like literature bomb day. But that was definitely something that stuck with me. There's something very interesting in terms of studying classics, in terms of it being something of an exercise in empathy, in terms of being able to, because it's the same, other than the fact that maybe you need to know a different language. Like, I don't know ancient Greek, I don't know ancient Latin. Well, I think it's just Latin. I don't think there's modern Latin. In this particular case here, like, I think the case that he had made was that if I want to be doing sort of work at the frontier of physics, I basically need to have a Large Hadron Collider. And I think my landlord might get a little mad if I try to set one up. Whereas in terms of classics, like, if you want to study Heraclitus, you have access to the same fragments that my prof does. My prof just got tenure. Well, sorry, former prof. I'm not at school anymore, but, you're all working with the same material. And essentially what you have to do, Nietzsche called philology the art of reading slowly. But essentially what you do is you take your understanding, not just of the world, but particularly the world as experienced by these authors, and use that to try and gain a better understanding. And as with so many things, right, you do sort of raise the question, well, what good is this, right? You can say that about math, you can say that about computer science, you could frankly say that about an MBA, even though it does seem to be something that's very costly and people seem to assign a very high value to it. But it's... to me, that kind of stuck with me. That actually, I kind of knew I was going to try and study some classics, but I actually took a second classics course, largely because of that indication. Because again, like, it is true that these are societies that have had a huge effect on our, on the modern world. But once you actually start looking at things, they are very, very strange, right? For lack of a better term. you will read some of this stuff and be like, my God, like what on earth were they thinking? And again, part of the process of like trying to gain an understanding in terms of what drove them. And again, I think that's a very good, you always keep hearing talk about soft skills and how that's useful in the business world or how that's useful in day-to-day life. It's actually one of the things that I think is really helpful. And again, what does this matter for Imperium's Greek Wars? I mean, in the end, you're going to have different ways that you get into this stuff. Takri was talking about how history was not a favorite subject, and it was largely because it seems to be that the course was very focused on dates. So, in this case here, I would have failed, right? Because I don't know the year in which the Sacred Band of Thebes was defeated by Philip. And so I probably wouldn't have done well on it. I would have done wonderful if it was like a media studies course, so I could refer to the steel mill. But in this case here, right? I'm pretty sure if your history class said, "Oh, and by the way, right? You like that 300 movie? Well, imagine that 300 movie, but it's 300 men and they're each paired off as lovers, and that's why they're the best fighters in Greece." I'm pretty sure you're going to find that a hell of a lot more interesting than just trying to remember what the dates are. That and wars are just a bunch of jerks being jerks, and that's not very interesting. Plus, big old America focus, so even more lame. Yeah, well, I mean, in fairness, my education was going to be a bit more Canadian focused. I think it's helpful to understand where you come from, but clearly, I mean, like obviously, there's different ways of even doing the history of the United States. Like clearly, in the case of the United States, there's this really unique experience of a bunch of intellectuals kind of like getting around. It's almost like you can imagine a bunch of like political science students in a dorm, and usually like before anything's said, you kind of hear a sound. It's like, yeah, wouldn't it be great if we like just put all the rules down and like we made the best, like just like the best country, man. It's like, oh yeah, and like we should have like this division of powers, man. It's like, like obviously that's not how it was made, but to a certain extent, right? How many times can you think of, like, when I think of intellectuals all sitting down and coming up with a bunch of rules for the ideal society, like, I guess now I would think of like the Soviet Union. But in the case of the US, that can become so interesting because then you think about, well, what were these people reading, right? I mean, clearly there's an influence. You have documents like the Federalist Papers. You have people actively arguing for their particular point of view, and why their way is the best. And so with that in mind, right, it's not just a question of sort of getting this history of sort of great men and that, America was always going to succeed. And instead it can be, what were the ideas that led them to say, in the end, the origins of actually, if you guys want if you guys want an interesting thought, how many of you would know that Canada has it's Canada Day, so I'm not even going to ask the question. I will just state it, and I'm sorry because I know this is not related to Greece, but I'm going to give you two examples of a way in which Canada indirectly has helped the formation and the identity of the United States. So first, there is the very famous ditty, "The Star and Spangled Banner." And the words are from a poem called "The Defense of Fort McHenry." Now, first of all, I love that name because it makes me feel like I should have a fedora that I should be tipping every time I say it. But it's also worth remembering that I believe that particular poem was written during the War of 1812. So this is the one that Canadians will never cease to. I mean, obviously it was British at the time, but basically this is the one where the White House got burned down. But it is also fair to say that like that particular conflict ended in a draw. Yes, I have heard the Arrogant Worms song as well. There's a ton of really interesting ideas about about kind of the circumstances under which that war happened, and it would be worth sharing, but I do want to get to the end of the tutorial, so I'm going to move on that. But yeah, so it is in fact, first of all, the war with what would eventually become Canada was in fact sort of the source material for what would become the Star and Spangled Banner. So you have the 7 Years' War. So first of all, the catalyst for the 7 Years' War could be thought of as a conflict between the French colonies, which were basically Canada, and the British colonies, which would eventually be the 13 colonies, and eventually the United States. So in fact, you could also kind of say that whenever Canada and the US start fighting, it tends to be pretty disastrous, and that's maybe one of the reasons why the two countries get along so well now, because normally it's actually caused a lot of chaos whenever the two nations fight. But perhaps more importantly, at the end of the 7 Years' War, there was a choice that the British needed to make. So it was clear that sort of the French were defeated, and they were kind of picking the terms in terms of, basically of surrender. And essentially, the British were being offered either the Sugar Island of Guadeloupe, or maybe it's Guadeloupe, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it, or the the French colonies in North America. And I don't think it was Edmund Burke. I think it was a relative. I think it was the generation before. But there was actually an argument in the British Parliament that says even if the French were to give us the North American colonies as a gift, we should not accept it, because by removing the threat of a foreign power from the 13 colonies, it would effectively remove their it sort of remove their attachment to the homeland. That essentially through the removal of that threat, there wouldn't be any reason for the British colonies in North America to sort of retain any loyalty to the crown. So again, it's an argument made in Parliament. It's like one of these things that shows up. I think it would still be called the Hansard then. And they were exactly right, because of course the next conflict in North America that we kind of talk about is of course the American Revolution. So yeah, that is Canada's indirect contribution to American independence. It's like the decision for Britain to take the French colonies essentially was that the removal of that threat to allow the American colonies to have their rebellion. But equally importantly, when there was the attempt to incorporate us, we bombed the hell out of the Americans and gave them the lyrics to their national anthem. Apart from improving cities, you can also build various facilities outside of cities. Blacksmith stable, defensive walls, and temple. All of these buildings have their own function, and so you should carefully select a location for them to maximize their effect. All available facilities are listed in the Build Facility list in the State menu. Let's build a temple on the hill above the capital city. Temples in general increase birth rates near all nearby cities as they bring a blessing and the protection of the gods. Okay, so... Oh, okay, this isn't built by settlers. Temple accelerates population growth in cities that are within a 3-tile range from it. Oop, I gotta right click. We're almost done this turn, except for one little detail. As we explained, connecting mines with cities increases the resource production of those mines. Our stone reserves are quite low at the moment, and one of our settlers is waiting for new orders anyway, so let's send him to build a road to the stone quarry. Build a road to connect the stone quarry with the existing road network, and then end the turn. Okay, I'm just trying to think where the stone quarry is, though. Ah. So if I just do build route like this, it looks like they're going to follow the existing route anyway. I hope that was right. So that looks like the unit that was supposed to get the bonus for being in the forest was driven off. I'm kind of curious what happened there. Demand rejected. Chalkidike does not want to cancel the peace with Athens. Okay, 84, I'm guessing that's wheat, is missing to supply the trade route with Chalkidike, and the trade agreement could be cancelled as a result. The inability to fulfill the trade agreement might force our trading partner to look elsewhere for more reliable deals. Before we get back to your responsibilities as king, let's take time to go over a bit more about cities. When you select a city on the map, the area around the city, called City Range, is highlighted. There are tiles where wood and food are harvested. Note that tiles outside the city range will not be harvested. The number of tiles in a city range is determined by city size, but only tiles under your ownership, will be included in its range. The size of the city also affects production and consumption of resources of the city. Larger cities consume more basic resources for maintenance, but they produce more of other resources, e.g. influence or knowledge. To be able to recruit new units in cities, or certain other facilities, the city must be ready for this function. It needs to be specialized. Specialization is displayed under the city name in the unit menu. New cities automatically get a specialization for some basic unit types. Okay, so I think I was asking about this before. And now it's indicated it. So you can change or add new specializations by clicking on the Change Specialization action button. So what news is awaiting us? Chalkidike declined our request to declare war on Athens. It is quite disappointing, but perhaps we could make a different proposal, one that may be more successful. The Athenian colony of Potidaya lies in the south of Chalkidike. They would probably have moved against it long ago, but the other two Athenian colonies on our coast are too close, and Athens could wage a war against Chalkidike using those two outposts as forward bases. We could propose a joint military campaign to Chalkidike. We shall take the two coastal cities of Pydna and Methoni, and they will attack Potidaya. Let's see if this would sway the Chalkidicaean leaders to our side. You can make the proposal through the diplomacy window. We set the territorial goals of this campaign this time for you, but when the tutorial ends, you can make your own proposals with conditions that suit your needs. Yeah. Okay, so that's already picked them here. Campaign duration in 5 turns. Huh. Now that's really interesting, actually. So how would you... Oh. I'm just trying to think how, under normal circumstances, I would try and decide like how many turns I could accomplish the goal. Fortunately, the game's kind of picked it for me, but hopefully we will entice Chalkidike with this offer, but again, we shouldn't rely on their agreement. Some of our units are within striking distance from Macedonia, whose defenders were crushed during last turn. We shouldn't let this chance slip away. Launch an attack on Macedonia. Looking at all these magnificent beards, because I'm going to be going back to work. So, like I said, the sad reality of my work environment is that we are being told to go back into the building, but we're being told to go back into the building at exactly the time the number of COVID cases are going up, and there are actually people in specifically my division, that have gotten sick and have tested positive for COVID. So I am getting a bunch of N95 masks tomorrow. But the thing is like over the course of the pandemic, I haven't shaved, and like it's as much an excuse just not to spend money on blades. But that doesn't work well with masks. So in this particular case here, like I absolutely have no trust in my employer whatsoever. In fact, if anything, they're actually changing the office to this open concept. So as a result, what I'll probably do is I'll actually shave down to an outrageous mustache, but something that doesn't like prevent the seal from the proper mask. And then we'll see. We're told it's a quote-unquote test, but I don't really see the workplace being this aggressive in pursuing a return-to-work policy and turning around and saying, actually, work from home is fine. Oh, interesting. So they do want the cavalry to move here. Okay. But yeah, so needless to say, I'm mourning my last couple of years of philosopher-style beards. Commander's advice, dangerous position, prediction of... okay, so it wants me to do an attack where... well, it's probably, again, to weaken so that my more advanced troops can do more. Victory! Our soldiers fought like lions. Oh, maybe not. So... yeah. So lower more battles penalty for the city. The enemy was strong, but the gods were on our side this time. The population of Macedonia is growing. So that specifically was a reference to the objectives menu, which was introduced at the start of the game. So 40% penalty. So it looks like this penalty stacks. We gain knowledge, slaves, food, gold, coal, iron, wood, and stone. Looking at these numbers, I'm assuming that these are like per turn amounts, but we'll see. 54 casualties versus 517 expelled or killed. Macedonia has fallen. City conquests often lead to damages to city infrastructure and subsequent need for repairs. When even the basic functions of the city have been damaged, it's necessary to enact emergency aid. Otherwise, you risk a complete destruction of the city or building, as people will abandon such a place. Partial damages can be repaired later. However, until the infrastructure is in good order again, the production and function of the city or building will be negatively affected, and people will keep moving away. This, by the way, I think is really interesting. So they haven't unpacked it too far as how this game works, but it does actually seem to be that there's a somewhat complicated, or at the very least there's some kind of simulation in terms of overall prosperity levels and migration, which I don't know if they'll cover in the tutorial, but I do actually think that's a pretty interesting idea. I'm hoping I'll learn a little bit more about it. Cities and buildings need to be repaired are shown in the damage panel on the right side of the screen. Take good care of your cities and other facilities. During our attack, Macedonia sustained heavy damage, and it needs extensive repairs or else it will be completely destroyed. While the city's infrastructure is being repaired, we can continue our campaign against Athens. With Macedonia taken, the other Athenian colony, Pydna, is now surrounded. We could use the general to try and sway the city's governors to join us without further bloodshed. Use the provoke uprising action to influence the city's populace. Try to incite unrest, in Pydna, and persuade it to open the gates to us. Oops. Influence of Macedonia in Pydna is growing, and the morale of the city has dropped by 8. Groups of powerful citizens led a campaign in the city and stirred waves of public unrest. One thing I do find kind of interesting, so I don't know 100% about Greek colonies. So as far as I can tell, there would be these efforts of sort of a group of people from a city moving out and starting their own colony, and that there would be a relationship sort of with the home colony. In fact, the sort of, I guess, constitution or laws of a given city, in fact, have been written by some philosophers. So, for instance, Parmenides wrote, I can't remember what colony he wrote the laws for, but I was a little surprised to find that out. But apparently, I'm trying to remember, I can't remember the exact names, but I believe there are also cases where a colony would actually wind up going to war with its sort of its home. I mean, it's its own place, right? So it's weird to say that it's going to war with its home. Kind of makes it sound like it's it sort of makes it sound like it's a civil war. It's not exactly what I meant, but yeah, I don't know. Like I was maybe a little surprised to find out that there was this there's this case where there'd be people who sort of used to live in a place, went out with their own colony, and that even though there was this sort of established relationship, that didn't necessarily prevent a war from breaking out. I should probably read this. It's Mother City. Yeah, that's probably the better way of putting it. Anyways, I'm not really going anywhere with this other than to just say that it happened, but I found it interesting. Sorry, if you can just give me a quick second here. I just need to make sure that I'm not missing something. Again, I want to try and be somewhat responsible in terms of the time that I go to sleep, but I also need to make sure I get some writing done. So... Sorry, I realize the silence is just murder, but I'll be back in just a minute. Okay. Groups of powerful citizens led a public campaign in the city and stirred waves of public unrest. The Athenians are too proud to bow to us. Our attempt had only a minor effect on the general morale of the city. They won't admit that we, mere barbarians, could defeat them. We'll see. But first, we need to cover one of our most crucial resources, namely food. We should try to be as self-sufficient in its production as possible. Build another field next to your new city. Okay. So This is the new... Oh, right here. Okay. I am a little intrigued. I wasn't sure if those were sheep or horses, but that did seem to be a dedicated resource beside that settler unit. Our turn is now over. It's time for our opponents to make their moves. The opponent's panel is displayed on the top of the screen when your opponents are completing their turns. The panel allows you to filter those players and actions you really want to see. The skip button allows you to skip the current animation. The fast forward skips the current player. This one allows you to skip all actions at once and close the whole panel. There's also a button that leads to the Imperiums library and pin button that releases the camera so that you can shift the view whenever you want. You can see only actions of those players with whom you have particular treaties. However, you can limit what you see to actions of enemies only, or even to enemy actions directly related to you in the game's settings, accessible from the main menu. Okay, we've stalled long enough. Time to end the turn. This sounds perfectly designed for my kind of broadcast. Okay, so this is... I'm assuming this would give us some kind of food, because this looks like game? Anyways. Whoa! Wrong button. We never did find out what happened with these guys. Military campaign agreed. Chalkidike agreed to a joint military campaign against Athens. They made it! The armies of Chalkidike reached all of the targets of the military campaign against Athens that we agreed upon. Now it is up to us to complete our end of the bargain. Our honor is at stake. Oh dear. I'm not sure... Okay, here we go. Morale of starving Antander's army dropped by 40%. Antander's army is starving and its morale decreased by 40%. Hardship of military life is felt more intensely when a unit is cut off from supplies. A solution should be found soon as the reliability of the unit decreases with every turn. Point 19 is missing to supply the trade route with Chalkidike, and the trade agreement could be cancelled as a result. The inability to fulfill the trade agreement might force our trading partner to look elsewhere for more reliable deals. Now, this is a tricky situation for a tutorial to be in, right? Because in one sense, you don't want to overwhelm the player with information, but what does strike me as a little odd here is that we seem to kind of have made this aggressive move in the upper left-hand corner, and we now seem to be kind of losing in that area, and there doesn't really seem to be a whole lot of... Like, the game kind of seems pretty sanguine about the fact that there's big problems up in the north here. Likewise, we did this trade agreement, but we don't seem to be fulfilling the terms. And again, it sort of makes me wonder, it's like, well, how seriously should I take this trade agreement? Like, what do I do about this? But I mean, again, the focus clearly has been on this war with Athens. So I can see why they don't necessarily want to pull my attention all over the place, but I'm curious if this will be addressed before the end of the tutorial. The last menu we haven't talked about yet is the map menu in the lower left corner. The menu includes a mini-map that you can use to move around the map, as well as zoom in and zoom out buttons that function the same as a mouse wheel. There is also the settings panel on the right-hand side of the menu that allows you to change the display of the map. Take some time and click through the buttons to find what they do and how they can be of use to you. There are 3 more buttons on top of the menu leading to the strategic overview, political map, and trade overview windows. Now back to Macedonia. Chalkidike accepted the conditions of our joint military campaign. Surprisingly, they immediately declared war on Athens and conquered Potidaia. It means that they reached their campaign goals, and it is now up to us to do the same to honor our agreement. First, though, we need to take care of the situation in the north. Okay, so they are addressing this now. Where Dardanian scouting cavalry cut off our supply lines and our units are stranded without food and armaments. Starving units quickly lose morale and courage, so action must be taken fast. Supply lines are vulnerable and thus should be well guarded. Check the Imperium's library for more information. We have to restore the supply lines from Edessa and ideally destroy the marauding cavalry unit. It means pulling back from currently held positions, but the situation demands it. Restore supply lines and attack the enemy cavalry unit. Okay, so in this case, we're moving from our forested area. Now, so it says here, equal chances and free from doubt. I am a little intrigued. So I guess it would be this unit that was cut off from supplies. Draw. The enemy was strong, but the gods were on our side this time. We inflicted some damage on the enemy cavalry, but the unit was able to resist our main attack force. On the other hand, we encircled them, and now they have no supplies or connections with their own command. This will probably force them to pull back. Meanwhile, Recover is yet another option for healing units. This one is possible only in close proximity to a city, as new recruits needed to replenish the ranks are taken from larger population centers. This is a relatively fast way of repairing a unit, but it costs resources, and the unit is very vulnerable during the process. Generally, this is the most expensive way to heal your units. It's safer to send units back to the city where they can be healed. Heal inside if you have the option. Use the Recover action to replenish the ranks of the damaged unit. So, I'll just be honest here. This is absolutely something I would not want to do in this situation. So they talk about how the unit is very vulnerable in this situation. So I believe I'm already getting a penalty for being cut off from supply lines. There's a unit that's kind of uncontested over here. And then there's this scouting unit, which may be weak. Excuse me. But, you know, like, let's face it. This was a serious enough problem that we needed to redirect a unit. So, looking at this situation, I'm doing this because the game is telling me to, but I can't actually think of a situation where I would have a unit exposed like this and do this recovery move. Let's return to our southern border and the war against Athens. Our position is even stronger. We can try to influence Pydna to switch sides once again to prevent unnecessary loss of lives. If they don't open the gates, the city will have to be taken by force. This Colossus of Rhodes is kaput. Influence of Macedonia in Pydna is growing, and the morale of the city has dropped by 6. Groups of powerful citizens led a campaign in the city and stirred waves of public unrest. The stubborn citizens of Pydna still refuse to surrender. Considering that the city has very limited defenses, it might fall with our initial attack. Attack the city of Pydna. Draw. Our chances were slim, but we did what we could. I'm not quite sure why it's suggesting the order that we're working on here, but again, I'm following what the game's sort of suggesting. Another draw. Just taking a look at the review. Defeat. We had a good chance, but the gods did not stand by us this time. Unbelievable! The Athenians are fighting like lions, still resisting. Our next wave of attacks must overcome their arrogance. This is the end of the tutorial. Macedonia is now fully in your hands. Don't forget that you committed yourself to take Pydna within 3 turns. We will explain some important game rules, mechanics, and features in the following few turns, but there will be no more assignments. If you want some suggestions on where to focus your efforts, check the list of objectives in the state window under this icon. They won't offer you advice, but they outline some strategic goals that will bring you some rewards. The full responsibility for this land and its people now rests upon your shoulders. It's up to you, it's up to you how your name and the name of Macedonia will be noted in the historical annals. Good luck. So I suppose my first question here is, so if I move them up, surely I should be able to take the city. Yeah, there we go. So victory, our soldiers fought like lions. Got a bunch of stuff. All goals of our joint campaign with Chalkidike against Athens were reached. Together we are stronger. The gains for both our countries outweighed the losses. Okay, so big rewards. Now, I suppose the next question I would have would be, why wouldn't I want to send reinforcements to deal with the enemy unit here? Ah, because I don't have the action points. All right. So as a follow-up... Okay, so nothing I can do with them. I can't see much of a reason to move out of Amphipolis, so this is kind of protecting my borders. This is... Okay, so this is a decent example about where I feel like I've been given some fundamentals for the game, but I'm a little lost in terms of what I should do. So a great example of this would be... So, we've got gold, we've got coal, we've got stone. I'm maybe a little less clear in terms of, these resources and what they're giving me. Actually, I guess one thing I'd point out is that, normally when I see sort of a red or orange color, I'm like, ooh, I must be losing this. So, last turn resources 2.2, so last turn surplus loss plus 5.4. It seems to me like I'm getting more of this, but it's talking about how I'm potentially failing on my obligations. So one thing I'm slightly inclined towards doing is building more farmland. But it's maybe not the most, I'm not 100% clear that whether or not this is the most important thing I could be doing with my settler right now. So what I'm going to do here is just go to the objectives. Oop. It's probably not what I wanted. Okay, Macedonia's position among Hellenic nations remains on the periphery. We need to befriend and make a military pact with similar states in order to prove our worth to the rest of the world. If we're to drag Macedonia from the backwoods and shape her into a foremost nation of Hellenes, we will need to secure sufficient resources that can either be obtained through trade or exploitation of local natural resources, or both. Yeah, I really feel like this could do with some expansion. Edessa and Aigai. While our nation mourns its king, we must see to the defense of Aigai and Edessa. Should either of these towns fall, our position would be grave indeed. Do what you can to ensure their security. Okay. Vengeance. Macedonia is in mourning. King Perdiccas has died in battle against the Illyrian tribes. His son is an infant, so it's now up to you to take up the mantle and sword and seek vengeance upon the Dardanians, which is probably what we're going to be focusing on moving forward. And then military reforms, seen as a backward nation. We're Hellenes after all. We will undoubtedly meet those who disagree with swords, but we need to prepare ourselves first. Advanced military units, elite training, and stronger city fortifications should be researched as... Okay, so this is a pure research goal. So let's maybe take a second here. So we've got move unit, build route, load unit, fortify, sell, destroy road. Okay. So I think I'm going to settle for building some more farmland for the next little bit. Now, I suppose the next question would be, what do I want to do with... So, I suppose one thing that intrigues me here is the idea of my defenses, right? So, right now I've got military units. I've got one in Amphipolis. I've got one sort of defending the city here. There's a side of me that would say fortifying is not a bad idea. Let's maybe just see. Yeah, so this northern area up here doesn't actually really seem like there's a whole lot for me to do. So I could use it as a scout, or I could just try and fortify my position. Now, one thing I do need to keep in mind, of course, is that this isn't old world, so I don't need to worry as much about I don't need to worry as much about the like the cost in terms of turns. Okay. Now, if I recall correctly, the purpose of this unit was to... Nope, sorry. I thought it might have been to build a road to the mines. This unit's building the road to the mines. So one thing I might want to do is, this looks like another resource that I'm collecting. Actually, okay, there's a couple things that I can do here. So one, I'm going to build a road to this resource to add that to the network. And then the other thing I probably want to do is connect my new colonies, because it looks like there isn't a road to Agai, and I probably should have that. I guess the alternative is... Now, you know what? So we'll start in Pella. But from Pella, we're going to build the road that we need. Okay, not much for this unit to... I mean, yeah, we'll just skip it. The only other thing I would want to think of is there an improvement that I want to build in this area? So mounted and transport units can be built in a stable. Actually, I guess there's one item here, so if it's within 3 tiles, I should maybe consider whether a temple in this region would be a good idea. So... just also trying to think if there's any other cities that I might want to take. So 1, 2, 3. Oh, that's very helpful that they show me the range of this thing. So I would assume the largest... It's like obviously Pella and Therma are already connected to a temple here. So essentially anything in these regions, I probably would want it to be a little bit closer to the interior. I'm not 100% sure where I would... I mean, the other thing I would maybe want to consider is, like, am I giving up desirable farmland? So this, like, definitely counts as desirable farmland. But the limit to my range... yeah, so we won't build... So the river keeps me from building here, so in practice, this is kind of the closest I could get by with. It might be kind of desirable to build here, because this doesn't look like very good territory, but then I wouldn't be able to access. Well, I guess the other thing I could try and do is build here. Oh, Christ. No! Damn it. I mean, it works. I don't know if there's a way to, like, trash it. I was thinking of... I wanted to... I was going to hit the right mouse button to cancel, but right mouse button does the action. And I don't think there's an undo option. Anyways, it was a chance for me to boost the population in these areas. I'm doing that. So there might be a temple for Edessa in the future. It depends on whether or not we claim this city. But obviously that's further down the road. So I think that is it for this turn, and I'm probably going to have to wrap up the playthrough reasonably soon. But let's just take a look and see what happens next turn with this little adventure. I'm slightly weirded out that there's... Okay. So, I mean, this is exactly what I was hoping to avoid. The Sydney of Pydna in Pyria was abandoned. Oh, darn it. I forgot to repair the stuff. Damaged city infrastructure and low happiness in the region forced all people out of the city. Perhaps it could be rebuilt again. I wonder if there's a way to reload the previous turn. If I have to choose between building the temple and building and repairing the city that we just took over, obviously I want to... all right, where are we? Oh, I'm gonna have to go one turn earlier. I'm a little curious. What do you all think of this game so far? I realize it's just been the tutorial, and I feel like there's quite a bit sort of lying under the surface here still. But there we go. So I guess the other thing I'm curious about... Okay, yeah, so we're locked into... Yeah. We're locked into losing this unit. I do feel a little salty about, like, I guess I'd pointed out here that given the fact that I kind of predicted that this would be the fate of the unit, I'm not 100% sure how I feel about the tutorial putting you in a situation where you do something that is obvious to a new player is bad and they have to live with the consequence of it. I just think it would be better to show a strategically useful time to do that heal. Oh, that's interesting that it reminds you of Crusader Kings. I haven't actually seen the personal level that makes that people bring up on CK, but it definitely is like the grand strategy is not just a marketing side, not a marketing term for this game. Like, it's very clear that they're definitely keeping the, like, I think it tags itself both as 4X and grand strategy, and it's really clear that they're taking both titles seriously. Like, it does seem to be there does seem to kind of be the influence of both going on there. If nothing else, it just let me be a big nerd about Greek stuff for a while. All right, resources play a very important role in the game, and you should always take care to use them effectively. Gold is acquired from gold mines. Also, cities can generate income if they are upgraded to trading centers. Gold is mostly used for soldiers' pay and maintenance. Incidentally, our gold amount has kind of gone down pretty steadily turn by turn, so I might want to take a look at that. Coal is acquired from coal mines and is used mostly in production in cities and blacksmiths. Stone is acquired from stone quarries and is used for construction and repair works in cities and other buildings. Iron is acquired from iron mines and is used when recruiting new units for armaments. Food is produced on fertile lands lying within a city range and is consumed by all of your people and units. Food cannot be stored for long, and the portion that has gone bad will be thrown away at the end of each turn. That's actually kind of neat that you can't hoard food. So that's kind of, I suppose, what prevents you from like covering the map with fields. Wood is harvested from forests, hills, and woodlands and is necessary for all construction and repair works. Influence is produced in cities and increases with city size and importance. It can be used as a counterweight in case another country wants to spread its influence on your territory, but in the same way you can use it to convince foreign cities, tiles, and units to join your country without starting a war. Knowledge is generated in cities, and the more people you have, the higher the knowledge level in your country. You can use it to research new technologies. Citizens are born in cities. The birth rate can be regulated through the birth rate support mechanism. They are both the workforce and the basis for your standing army. Slaves represent the main workforce of your state, and they greatly affect the production of all other resources. They are mainly produced in slave markets and partially in the cities. The ideal ratio of slaves to citizens depends on the type of government. Too many slaves in the society has a negative impact on happiness. If the numbers are too low, the resource production is negatively affected. Happiness indicates the overall mood of your citizens and is a combination of many factors, like the type of government, the abundance of resources, the administration centered on the capital city, etc. A higher happiness rate positively affects army morale and also prevents enemies from spreading their influence in your cities. On the contrary, lower happiness rates decrease army morale, increases immigration and the number of revolts, and makes it easier for your enemies to exercise influence at the border regions. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'd kind of like to keep playing a bit longer, but I'm also a little bit conscious of how much sort of added value I'm going to get out of a few more turns on my side here. So I think I'm actually going to call it here because we are getting close to the 4-hour mark. I realized that there was a longer lead-in to the broadcast here, but I don't necessarily think this is a bad time to stop. And one of the things that I'm actually going to be doing over the next little while is I'm going to be trying to read the manual between now and when I play this game next. Now, in a perfect world, I'd love to say that I'm going to do this game next week, but there's also a couple of practical considerations that I have here, which is that I would like to get back to Out There, and it's been about 2 or 3 weeks since I played that. And I also have, the usual recording that I need to do, so more Call to Simulator videos over the weekend and such. So it's possible that I may need to take, I may need to just kind of put this back in the rotation and catch up on a couple of the other games that I would like to cover. I think what I will do when I play this game next, I'm going to continue on with the tutorial, but what my hope is that I am actually going to be able to put some time towards basically getting some of the details that I feel I am lacking on the sort of the next steps to take in terms of the game here. I know that there will be a little bit more that the tutorial tells me as I run through. It said it would tell me more, but it wouldn't give me any more tasks. But I would be interested in seeing if I can maybe gain a better understanding of the game through reading the manual now that I've seen the tutorial. But overall, I'm really grateful that Cube Games gave me a key to show you this. I suspect probably this broadcast was maybe not what they had in mind when they sent me the key, and I do apologize for that, but it is a chance for me to sort of establish where I think this kind of game is interesting and will give people kind of a hook to become interested in the topic and the game itself. I will just remind you that it is currently 50% off as part of the Steam sale, so if you are thinking of picking it up, now is not a bad time. There will also be DLC released for this game in the third quarter of this year. Again, I think it's a reality of the current age that these dates are always subject to change based on the just productivity and people's ability to do stuff. But yeah, I mean, if there's sufficient, I mean, I get to talk about the Sacred Band of Thieves. I was very delighted by the wintry smiles that went over a few of your faces when when I referred to the Simpsons steel mill. But I'm glad that people are into this. I am looking. So what I'm really looking forward to is I'm looking forward to gaining a certain degree of mastery over this game, so that I can make some really clear, like I can articulate some really clear decisions about why I'm doing certain things. Because of course in the tutorial it's a little bit more guided, and I was able to say things like, okay, I'm not 100% sure. Oh, it just occurred to me I didn't build that temple that I wanted to. Anyways, that doesn't matter. We'll do that next time. But oh, Knight, I'm leaving. It's D-Pain. I'm leaving. No, don't host me. Thank you for the... Tell you what, everybody who's coming in from Knight and it is D-Pain, I'm going to be hosting somebody in a little bit. How many of you have heard of the Sacred Band of Thieves? And how many of you have seen The Simpsons? Oh my god. And Ecorb, first of his name. Thank you, all of you. Every single one of these people are a very worthy streamer. I was actually thinking of hosting D-Pain. But these are all wonderful people. I met It Is D-Pain through Apocalypse, and then I met Knight97 and Ecorb through her name. I'm sorry. I believe I've been corrected on this before. I am very sorry. It's just a default reaction on the internet that is not helpful at all. I am sorry. That's a particularly shameful one because I actually should have known. But I'm sorry. Sometimes everybody just appears as text rather than the human being. No, I appreciate it, because if we're not corrected, then we don't improve. Oh yes, Vanguard Master is currently doing a Kickstarter for their game. I mentioned that it's a bit of a slow start now, but obviously getting the word out there is important. So thank you, Vanguard, for reminding me of that. But yes, anyways, some wonderful broadcasters, people who are very supportive of me, and I apologize that all of you are stopping by at the channel just around the time that I'm wrapping up, but I actually have a lot that I need to get through right now. And I will, however, take a second here to say that Cube Games gave me an opportunity to play this game, Imperiums Greek Wars. It is definitely pretty heavy on the 4X and Grand Strategy. So it's a complicated game, but it's a very interesting one in a period of history that I feel like is underrepresented. So in this, we are playing Philip II of Macedonia, who is probably better known as Alexander the Great's father. But it is fair to say that the expansion of Macedonia from sort of this, like, again, if you would think about who would wind up taking over the region, I don't think that would have been on anybody's sort of top list. But of course, it was the foundation from which Alexander did launch his empire. And so in this particular case here, you kind of get to play out that history, and one that, except for Old World, hasn't really been realized inside of a game, and I think is actually ripe material for that kind of for a very interesting setting, a very interesting game. So we spent a bunch of time with the tutorial. I spent a lot of time referring to old Greek ideas. I should ask what you were all playing, because I'm sure that there are some people watching who would like to follow you. But for those of you who are interested in it, Cube did give me a copy of the game to sort of show off for promotional purposes. If you are intrigued, you can check out the VOD, although keep in mind the first hour is sort of introductory remarks. The actual gameplay will start an hour after the stream starts. That'll give you a little bit of idea. The developer also has their own Twitch channel, twitch.tv/cubegames. And on top of that, the broadcaster seems to play on Steam every once in a while. And so in addition to it being half off, that can also help you give you an idea as to whether or not this is a strategy game you're interested in. And then, of course, I'll be playing it in the future as well. But I know there's a whole bunch of you that just came in, and I'm really sorry that I'm leaving you all. You're playing the Forest. Oh, that's right. D-Pain even put that on his Twitter announcement. Let me just take a second here. He played with fire tonight. Okay, now if you'll forgive me, I'm just going to turn off the main screen for a little bit. That's just because I'd like to try and find somebody to host. And we got to see who's live. All right, so we don't have anybody on... Okay, I've got two sort of classic streamers, so I'm going to leave this in your capable hands, chat. Outworld just got started. He's doing some Mortal Kombat speedruns. And then we've got Kilgore Trout, who is playing Martian Gothic Unification. Oh, actually, you know what? We also have Melee Mage for Final Fantasy XIV. Would you like to see Final Fantasy XIV? Or does the retro stuff sound interesting to you guys? It's actually been a while since I've been able to host Melee Mage, and he's a really nice guy. I also know that Kilgore and Outworld are reasonably large streamers, so it'd be nice if I can show some support to someone I know in Vancouver who's doesn't normally get that kind of attention. Okay, I'm going to host, unless there are any objections, I'm going to start raiding Melee Mage and leave you all in his capable hands. Lovely. All right. Thank you, everybody, for sticking around.
Trademarks do not have a fair protection, so there are times when our legal team need to act if it's too close for comfort.
Stop. Night, everyone. Night Decree. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out. Please treat Melee Mage well. He's a really nice guy. I'll see you all Monday.